tons of produce for our community. Thank you so much for being here today, for taking the time to come up to a place like this in the morning. I always love starting my day in the garden. There's nothing like it. To celebrate coming together as community and leaning on each other to find beauty in the land that we have here in the city, and taking what we do what we do here and sharing it with the greater community. So thank you so much.
Good morning, all. My name is Nicole Farley, and I'm one of the organizers that helped put this beautiful garden together. And I'm just going to tell you a little story about how I became involved. I moved to Salt Lake City in the fall of 2020, not knowing a soul in this city, but very excited to get here and get involved in the community. And one of the first opportunities I had was while walking through
welcome to the 3 January 2023 City Council meeting. We continue to host hybrid meetings to keep everyone healthy and safe. Our meetings are public, and you are welcome to join us in person or by watching from the Council's agenda page, Facebook, YouTube, or SLC TV. We hope you'll continue to join us in whichever manner you feel most comfortable. This is a work session meeting during which there is no public comment. Please join us tonight during our 7 p.m. formal meeting to share your comments. We, of course, welcome your feedback anytime by mailing us at P.O. Box 145476, Salt Lake City 84114, email council.comments@slcgov.com, or 24-hour phone line 801-535-7654. Written comments we receive on agenda topics are shared with council members and posted to our website, slccouncil.comment.com. We'll now begin our work session, and the first on the agenda is this is the time when we turn over the chair and the vice chair of the council, and we nominate the council chair and the vice chair for this upcoming council calendar year 2023. And I will look for any nominations for the chair, and we'll do that first, and then we'll go for the nominations for the vice chair.
Mr. Chair, the policy is also that people can express their own self-interest.
Thank you, Cindy. And also, we'll on the formal meeting, we'll formalize this with our vote at that point.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to nominate Darren Mono for chair.
Thank you. I have a nomination for Darren Mono as chair. Any other nominations at this time? Seeing no other nominations at this time, I'm going to allow Councilmember Mono to say a few words.
Thank you, Councilmember Wharton. I'm excited to continue the work that I've been doing with you, Mr. Chair, as during 2023 or 2022 into 2023. Particularly excited to continue working on some of the big land use and housing issues that we've been working on. So I appreciate the nomination, and I'm excited to serve if elected.
Can you speak more clearly?
Yes, I'm sorry.
Thank you very much. I want to hear what you're saying, otherwise I wouldn't be here. Thank you. I appreciate that. District 5?
Thank you. Yes.
Thank you. I just was saying thank you, Councilmember Wharton, for the nomination. I'm excited to serve and continue the work that we've been have been doing as vice chair in 2022. Particularly excited to continue working on housing and zoning ordinances and land use issues that I've been trying to focus on.
Thank you. Any other? Can you hear me very well?
I can hear you kind of, sort of, not as well as I'd like to, but I took my earplugs out, so.
Okay. No, it just seems like it was not that loud. So, any other comments, council members? See no other nominations at this time. I'll just look for a straw poll on this nomination of Councilmember Mono for chair for this year.
Wait, don't we do the ballots?
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, we should do the ballot. Sorry. We should do the ballot. Oh. Councilmember Pui, thank you for joining us. Glad to see you here joining us. So we're going to hand out ballots for the council members in person. The council members on hybrid, would you just please text Cindy and Cindy Lou your nomination?
A pen. I didn't bring one out.
Thank you, Council Chair. If you're all right, I'll read off the votes.
Thank you.
Councilmember Pui voted yes for Darren Mono for chair. Councilmember Amy Fowler also voted yes for Darren Mono as chair. Dan Dugan selected yes for Darren Mono. Councilmember Petro selected yes for Darren Mono. Councilmember Darren Mono voted for himself. And
Do we-
Councilmember Chris Wharton voted yes for Darren Mono.
And we have one absent, Councilmember Valdemoros is absent.
I did
this
get
time.
Amy. We were just missing Councilmember Valdemoros.
So that was 6-0 at this time. Councilmember Mono, congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you,
Formalize that in the
council members, for your
meeting.
support.
Now we move on to the vice chair. Any nominations for vice chair?
I would like to nominate Victoria Petro for vice chair.
I have a nomination for Councilmember Petro for vice chair. Any other nominations for vice chair? Seeing no other nominations for vice chair, Councilmember Petro.
Thank you for the nomination. I really look forward to this. I believe Councilmember Mono and I are great balances for one another. His skill set that he has accumulated through experience and education is almost exactly contrary to what I have gotten through education and experience. But there are two sides of a coin that our city is desperately needing. We need his architectural critical thinking lens to understand how to shape skylines and how to communities and with them kind of innovative ways to approach the problems that we're seeing. I also deeply love hanging out with our state legislators and making sure that our city and its greatness are amplified even to the places where it's unlikely for it to be understood. And so I think between the two of us, we'll be able to see a lot of different vantage points, and I'm optimistic about the opportunity to use the skills I have in concert with the rest of you, but particularly with Councilmember Mono.
Thank you, Councilmember Petro. Any other comments from the council? Seeing no other council comments, we will vote at this time. And to hybrid council members, send your text as you did the chair.
Thank you, Council Chair. I've received the votes of those present and online.
Not hear her very clearly.
Thank you. I have a soft voice. I'll do better. Thanks. All right. Those online, I've received their votes as well as those present. Councilmember Chris Wharton voted yes for Victoria. Sorry, Councilmember Petro. Excuse me. Councilmember Petro voted yes for herself. Councilmember Mono voted yes for Councilmember Petro. Councilmember Dugan voted yes for Councilmember Petro. And online, I received a yes from Councilmember Pui for Councilmember Petro and a yes from Councilmember Fowler for Councilmember Petro. So that's 6-0.
Thank you very much, Cindy. And Councilmember Petro, congratulations on vice chair. And I look forward to this coming year. This is a wonderful opportunity. Thank you. All right, Council, we're moving on to item number 2, the informational update from the admin. We have Lisa Schaefer online. We have Lindsay here and and Ashley. Come on up. And I saw Andrew's up also online.
You got it. You got it. I'm not afraid to speak my mind.
Okay, perfect.
When allowed.
Yeah.
But as far as hearing what you have to say, I'm a part of this community.
I'll pull this up so that it's so scary to talk so closely into a microphone. But hi, council members. Thank you for giving us this time to chat with you today. I believe you have our slides. Oh yeah, perfect. So let's go ahead and move forward to the first slide. And you can see some updates. This is from the New York Times statistics. So cases in the United States of COVID-19 are down 11% in the last 2 weeks. And here in Utah, we are seeing that cases are down 31% over the last 2 weeks. So that's, pretty promising trend. If we want to head on to the next slide, that just breaks down county by county how we're looking, and you can see Salt Lake County at the bottom of that list as being down 26%. So again, trend obviously going in the right direction there. On our next slide, you see data from our county's website, which is case counts over time over the past 3 months, and just stepping down there with that most recent update. Then we'll head on over to our next slide, which is our waste reclamation facility data. And as of Monday, the monitoring reports that we are actually in a decreasing phase for their testing. So that is promising right there. So that is kind of it for our COVID updates. Do any of you have any questions related to any of that? Okay, awesome. Then we'll move on over to Ashley.
Can you hear me? Wonderful. Happy New Year, council members. Congratulations to our new chair and vice chair. I have some community engagement highlights for you. As always, please visit slc.gov/feedback for regularly updated info and with highlighted ways to engage with the city. Next slide, please. First and foremost, our community and hold on one second. I'm having technical difficulties. What is going on?
Little technical difficulties at this time. We'll be with you in a second.
1 second. And we're back. Okay, so our Communities and Neighborhoods Division, we have our Housing SLC plan. After extensive community engagement, focus groups, and other opportunities, Communities and Neighborhoods is putting together the finishing touches on the 5-year draft housing plan, and will soon make it available to the public for feedback.
Excuse me, ma'am. We will be not answering your questions.
Silent?
Yes, thank you.
Planning has recently transmitted 2 ordinance changes. You should see that also soon. The landscaping changes to qualify for rebates. This is an update to align our ordinance with the Utah Department of Natural Resources and the Central Utah Water Commission rebate requirements, so residents can obtain the rebate. This was transmitted on December 21st, so you should see an update soon from there. The second update is that the downtown building height and street activation update related to building heights, review processes, and pedestrian spaces within the downtown zones. This was transmitted on the 27th of December, and that will receive an update as well in the next month or so. From our transportation division, we have our 400 South bus stop improvements, which is in District 4. That is also continuing into spring. The bus stops on 400 South are being improved for ADA accessibility, benches, connections to the sidewalk, and to accommodate frequent transit service. The project is expected to go out to bid on in this month, with expected construction during this spring. In November, we saw extensive substantial outreach for Capitol Hill traffic calming measures. That was the last stretch of engagement. That plan is being finalized and will be sent for bid for construction this spring. And then SLC's transportation master plan, dubbed Connect SLC, is being overhauled for the first time since 1996 and will help guide us through the next 4 decades. The initial phases of engagements have concluded and the information is being reviewed. A draft plan will be created from this and is projected to be finished by spring of this year. Next slide. From public utilities, we have our City Creek water treatment plant upgrade. The Public Utilities Engagement Team has created a 16-week campaign that launches this month. In a survey that's available on our feedback page on SLC Gov, it includes a video that we will ask residents for their feedback regarding the chosen design for the project. The survey will be live for a month. The team will also present on the status of the City Creek Water Treatment Plant Upgrades Project to the Greater Avenues Community Council this week. Public Utilities winter construction flyer for the water reclamation facility is being distributed to the Rose Park community via email, mail, and shared with others through other engagement efforts like going to PTO meetings. They will be implementing their Influent Pump Station Action Plan in the coming weeks, and due to this impact on District 1, Councilmember Petro Essler will be part of the outreach efforts, which we're so excited to collaborate there. Next slide. And then something that I'm really excited about, well, I'm excited about all engagement, but in particular, our Love Your Block program is going to be going through their second cycle of applications. They are now being accepted, and they close January 29th. Just as a recap for community members, the Love Your Block team is accepting our mini grant applications. Our applications can be found on our website along with the general frequently asked questions and requirements. The Love Your Block team can be reached at lyb@slcgov.com, or you can also call us at 801-548-2882. We encourage interested applicants to connect with our team to discuss project ideas, and they can assist in filling out an application. Love Your Block provides mini grants to West Side residents, businesses, and organizations to support neighborhood revitalization through volunteer-led projects one block at a time. So we're so excited to be starting phase 2 of this application cycle, and there's going to be a lot of engagement. This past cycle, we did about 200 hours of deliberating with community members out on the West Side. So looking forward to another phase. And that's all I got. Next slide.
Thank you, Ashley. Andrew?
Excuse me, just one quick second. I apologize. Technical issues. Sorry, Council. Excuse me, Andrew. Could you please give us some audio again? Thank you. We can hear you in the room. We're just having technical issue on the broadcast.
Is it resolved? Or?
The options are not presenting themselves as they should. So John's coming right now.
Okay, so we're going to take
about 10 seconds.
We'll be right back with you.
Thank you. That was cute. We are human, right? That was silly.
All right, Andrew, go ahead if you could, please.
All right. Is that any better for everyone?
One more time. Thank you.
Sure. This is my last slide, so I'll try and get by it quickly if you want me to.
Is speaking right now.
He is online right now, ma'am.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And excuse me, ma'am. The conversation is to us, and we'll be the ones asking questions.
And who's speaking is all, because I don't see like a name tag. Again, I am a community.
We can't have the discussion.
I'll be quiet. Yes,
Yeah.
ma'am.
Thank you.
So thank you for that pause. Andrew, we are hearing you now loud and clear on the broadcast. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Chair, are you ready?
Yes, go ahead, Andrew. Thank you.
Sure. The rapid intervention and encampment impact mitigation teams, it's been a little slow over the holidays. The county health department staff have not been available, so there's not been mitigations in that sense. The rapid intervention team has continued to work on their regularly scheduled areas and reports. The outreach teams for Volunteers of America have really focused the last few weeks on as many camps as possible, getting out information and supplies to them, information about options, transportation options to get inside, and some basic needs items as well. The RIT team continues to go around different areas of the city and scheduled places that are being reported to do basic cleanings. We do anticipate the health department will be back in full staffing as of next week, and we'll have more updates at that point. There is a resource fair scheduled for January 13th, the first of this new year, and it will be in the morning at Rio Grande or in that area. And more information can be shared with you soon. That is all, Mr. Chair.
And thank you very much, Andrew, Lindsay,
Thank
Ashley.
you.
Appreciate it. We'll be moving on to item number 3, Council. And the informational update from the equity team with Lindsay still here and Chris.
Hi, I'm
Hi.
Chris. I believe you should have the slides.
Bring that mic a little closer.
Let's get this a little bit closer. There we go. I believe you have the slides. Great. All right, so hi everyone, I'm Chris. I am the Know Your Neighbor Volunteer Coordinator. I'm just going to do a little bit of update on our program. For those of you who don't know, I'm just going to give a little bit of background. Today, there are around 28 million refugees in the world. Less than 0.5% of those will be permanently resettled in a country like the United States. In Utah, we have 68,000 refugees from the resettlement program, and almost all of those are residing in Salt Lake County, Salt Lake City. That's just a little bit of background on why this program is so important and the population that we work to serve. In Utah, casework for the population is around 12 to 15 months. That is intended to help refugees integrate by assisting with employment, enrollment in schools and English classes, teaching public transportation, setting up healthcare plans, and getting to appointments, official paperwork, bank accounts, etc. Typically, by the end of these 12 to 15 months, the integration process is not finished, and there is no longer an official way to help these refugees. That is why our program is so important. Our program not only continues to help refugees with these needs, but we also focus on social integration, which is a really big part of the integration process. We believe ties to the community, and particularly friendships, are vital to success. For us, integration is a two-way process in which newcomers, refugees, and the receiving society, our city, work together to build and secure vibrant and cohesive communities. To help achieve this, we pair mainstream community members with refugees to facilitate those relationships and help with anything else that is needed due to limited case management period. Next slide, please. In the past year, 2022, we have utilized 250 mainstream volunteers for a total of 4,300 volunteer hours. This brings our program to date total up to 18,000 volunteer hours. Those statistics started to be collected in 2016. In this year, over 1,000 refugees have been impacted by the program. This was done through 65 individual matches, 10 Refugee Services Office programs supported, and volunteers sent to 9 refugee community-based organizations, as well as 16 partner agencies. Next slide, please. One thing I wanted to share with you guys today is the human aspect of our program. This is testimony that was provided to us by one of our volunteers named Luis. He shared with us that on Saturday afternoon, I will make a note for the record real quick, this was back in June. Saturday afternoon, I received a message from Gabe telling me that Tuesday would be his high school graduation. For a long time, he has been working on obtaining and fulfilling this goal. In his message, he told me that he would be very happy if I could go to his graduation, so I did. He saw me and he was very happy despite the fact that all of his friends and family were there for him. It was important that I was at his graduation. This volunteer and this refugee had been matched for over a year as the volunteer as a tutor/mentor for the refugee. Another quick story I wanted to share with you is I reached out to one of our volunteers who had been matched for 3 years. Her and her sister have been working with this young woman as mentors in a more of a socialization capacity. When I called them to get a comment so I could share it with you, all 3 of them and all of their families were down in St. George vacationing together. I could not get any information. They were so busy laughing, but I thought that was pretty neat that they were matched in 2019, and still to this day, they're hanging out, and all of their families are have a nice relationship as well. Next slide, please. So this program was previously supported by one-year VISTA contracts. With the end of our VISTAs, we were really fortunate to get a one-year contract for a full-time Know Your Neighbor volunteer coordinator. I apologize. That started this state fiscal year, which is in October, and the duties and tasks that have been outlined for that position are all of the day-to-day operations. For this position, that means all volunteer and refugee recruitment, onboarding, and matches. For volunteers, that is making sure we have enough volunteers for all of our refugee community needs, making sure that everyone has done an orientation, background checks, and proper paperwork. And for refugees, that means that we know enough information for the refugee to be able to properly help them. As well as making sure that we have their paperwork done and that the 2 that we are going to match will be a good fit for each other. There is also a component of coordination for volunteer needs with partner agencies and refugee center programs, coordination with city and state staff, and ongoing projects for increased program efficiency. Right now, our big projects are getting more comprehensive background checks, which are fingerprints, and data system updates so we can keep better records and share between the city, the Salt Lake City Mayor's Office, and the state more easily. Another thing to note about this position is that it is a Salt Lake City Mayor's Office position. However, the position also is housed in the Refugee Services Office, which is at the state. Next slide, please. Additional staff support for this Know Your Neighbor volunteer program is from the Salt Lake City Mayor's Office. There is a policy advisor for refugees and new Americans. This position primarily supports the program through policy-focused support, relationship building with refugee, minority, and ethnic groups and organizations, and briefing the administration on emerging issues. On the Refugee Services Office, which is the state of Utah side of things, we have a great relationship, and the Refugee Services Office not only helps connect us with refugees in the community, but they have multiple positions that lend support to the Know Your Neighbor program as well. This is the data specialist, program coordinator, program management VISTA, RCBO coordinator, RCBO development VISTA, and the community team. I also would like to mention that the state is really eager about this partnership, and if anybody would be interested in communicating with them, they would be happy to come and attend an additional council meeting or session as well. And that is all I have for you today. Do you have any questions about any of the material?
Thank you very much, Chris. This is wonderful, and thanks for those stories.
Absolutely.
And I'd like just to get a little more information about how we can spread the information about the volunteer requests and how we get it out to our councils and community council members and others, because there's probably a lot of people who would love to help but don't know there's that need. So I would really let's communicate on that side of the house through
Absolutely.
our liaisons. So
I would love to increase our communications in the future.
yeah, beautiful. Thank you very much.
All right.
All right, Chris. Lindsay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Council, moving on to item number 4, Utah Open Meetings Law Training and Government Records Access and Management Act, GRAMA training. Cindy Lou is coming up to the table, and Katie is on should be coming online here. But Cindy Lou, we're all ears.
And I'm here too. I don't know if you can hear me or see me.
We got you now. Thank you.
Great. Thank you.
Cindy Lou's just coming up to the table right now, Katie.
Council Chair, we have two presentations, the order of which is dependent upon your direction. We have open and public meeting, and then the government records and access.
Perfect order.
Okay, Katie, I'll go ahead and let you go first then. Taylor, do you have or Scott, the open records, the open meeting slideshow? It would be the one I sent last Friday.
Just a moment. I'm sorry. I don't have that one loaded up.
Oh, then we'll
do this one first.
We'll do this one first. This is fine.
Great, thank you. Katie, I'll go ahead with this presentation. So first I want to thank you Council for the time to conduct a brief overview of the Government Records and Access Management Act, which is an acronym that we use in the city. The acronym is GRAMA, G-R-A-M-A. Today I just want to go over some of the statistics and a little bit about the GRAMA process here in the city. Next slide. So it was enacted in law in the state in 1991 and developed with the intent to provide public the right to access government records, also building guidelines for restrictions to public access and to prevent the abuse of confidentiality. Next slide. I've added this slide to our presentation this year because I want to emphasize that GRAMA requests come in for access to records of all types and all sorts of retentions. So the City Recorder's Office works with the departments in the city and is a liaison with the State Archives and Records Office to create and establish retention schedules for all records of varying cities of the department. Retention schedules are built based on the time and value of a record, and the disposition or destruction is managed with the department record managers and the recorder's office. I want to bring just one point is that the volume of data management, which data also includes record, is an item of specific interest and has opened an opportunity for the collaboration efforts with IMS. So the City Recorder's Office is working very tightly with IMS to establish retention protocols with softwares. Next slide. This is a list of things that are records. The rule of thumb that I like to just point anyone to, anything prepared, owned, received, or retained by a city employee is a record. So independent of format. Thank you. Next slide. Each record has a classification: public, private, controlled, and protected. Next slide. This is more about the process. Once a GRAMA request has been received, the city has 10 days assigned to respond to the requester. We can ask for an extension, we can grant the request. We, as the Recorder's Office, generally work through with the departments on how much time will be required to complete the request. There's a discretionary media option to give them 5 days for an expedited request, or for record requesters to ask for 5 days, or a fee waiver. Oftentimes we will request extensions if it's a large request, or if there's significant research or analysis required. Next slide. If a denial is granted for the reasons noted as it's protected, private, or controlled, the requester may appeal that denial. They have 30 days to appeal the decision, and you'll see here that it can go to the State Records Committee. Last year we had 17 appeals in the city, none of which went to the State Records Committee. I think there's one scheduled for this coming quarter. And next slide. So the key takeaways that we like to present in the GRAMA presentations that we do throughout the city is that city employees are the stewards of records created, received, owned, and retained, and records are regularly requested. It is strongly encouraged for all records to represent the city professionally and respectfully. Next slide. Our 2022 statistics include our total number, which was 16,427. That was an increase from the year 2021, and that bulk of increase was due to police record requests. Next slide. This is also a breakdown from what we've gathered in the opportunity to discuss this with you. Is you like to see the breakdown. Over 90% of the requests in our system are for the police department. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to get the police department grandma coordinators here today, but they present offering. If you guys have questions, we can definitely follow up with the numbers or with any information. 90% of the requests are from the police department. And then if you go to the next slide, you'll see the volume by department. Community and neighborhoods is our highest volume department outside of the separated city requests. We are working to build more opportunity for transparency of the files and records. There are several instances where people will request a certificate of occupancy record. It's not easy to find. So those requests are counted, although we may be giving the information within 1 to 2 days. That's part of CAN's requests. And that's all of my presentation.
Councilor Romano.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I know you said something, but I didn't quite catch it.
It's okay.
You're working to make it easier to get some of those things without needing to do a grandma request, or would they still need to do a grandma request for all of those things?
So, sorry. The idea is to build access without grandma requests required. Certificates of occupancy and other items on the Acela system are available to the public. They're
hard to find.
Hard to find.
Got it.
So we're trying to further develop more opportunities to get the data into a more accessible space.
Thanks, Cindy Lou.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Cindy Lou. Katie?
Thank you. Could the Open Meetings Act presentation be pulled up, please? Thank you. So first, I'd like to start by thanking Cindy Lou and her team. They're doing a great job continuing to focus on transparency and access to records, as she just mentioned. And this Open Meetings Act presentation is an annual requirement for the Salt Lake City Council and the RDA Board of Directors, as well as all of our other public bodies. But really the main theme is transparency. That's what the Open Public Meetings Act is, and that's what it requires of all of our public bodies. So next slide, please. Next slide. So as I mentioned, any meeting of a public body is open to the public unless there's an exception. And the exceptions are limited, as you all know, in your experience as council members. But the first question that we ask when we look at the Open and Public Meetings Act is, what is a public body? Next slide. And the City Council is a public body. Just for all of your reference, a public body is defined as any entity that is created pursuant to state law, ordinance, resolution, or policy. So it's very broad, and it can encompass quite a few of our bodies, including, of course, all of our public boards and commissions. And if an entity is a public body, then it's required to comply with the Open and Public Meetings Act. Next slide. And that means that meetings have to be open with very limited exceptions. So what is a meeting? It's not everything, but it is most things that you all do as a city council. And the definition is convening of a quorum to discuss, receive comments, or act on a matter over which the council has jurisdiction. Next slide, please. So when we really get into that, what does that mean? Well, it can mean electronic meetings, it can mean retreats, workshops, field trips. Anytime a quorum of the council or the RDA board is getting together to talk about or take action on items over which you have jurisdiction, which of course is quite broad as the legislative body of the city. Now, there are some things that are not included. Chance meetings, 4 of you happen to meet up at the grocery store, or social gatherings, you all go to a holiday party together, or instances when there's no quorum. Now, of course, if you have a chance meeting, or if you're at a holiday party and you get together and all stand in a corner and talk about items over which you have jurisdiction, that would be a violation of the Open and Public Meetings Act. So think about, even in those chance encounters, if you do have a quorum, to really be cautious about what you're communicating about, because again, the purpose is to make sure that the items that you discuss are done in a public meeting. Next slide. Next slide, please. So transparency starts at the very beginning. It starts with the notice and it goes all the way through to the actual meeting and then the keeping of the minutes. And the Open and Public Meetings Act talks about all of those things. So your council staff does an exceptional job of the posting of public notice. They have to be posted in various places as are listed on this slide. And they have to be posted in a certain way. So there's not only a how, which is this slide, but there's a what, which is the next slide, please. And that is both the annual meeting schedule and the every meeting. So you probably recall discussion in the end of 2022 about the annual meeting schedule. And that's the list of all of the meetings that you are going to have for the next year. And the reason that the Open and Public Meetings Act requires that is to give the public an opportunity to schedule and know when you're going to meet so they're not surprised, again, under that umbrella of transparency. Now, sometimes the council changes its annual meeting schedule or decides that it needs to hold one more meeting. And in that instance, you don't have to change your entire annual meeting schedule. But if, let's say the council decided, for the next 6 months, we need to meet on Tuesday and on Thursday, and you knew that that was going to be regularly scheduled annually or for this year, then you would want to revise your annual meeting schedule. Next slide. And if anyone has any questions, jump in. I apologize for not being able to be there in person today. So then, of course, every meeting that you have also has an agenda. And that agenda needs to be posted at least 24 hours in advance. Again, your staff does an exceptional job, and they're typically posted the Thursday before your Tuesday meeting, again, to give extra transparency to the public so that they have the opportunity to study the materials in the agenda. And the agenda has to have certain things: the date, time, and place of the meeting, and specific content about what you're going to be talking about. Next slide. The agenda, that specific content needs to have reasonable specificity, and with limited exceptions, the council or RDA board cannot discuss items that are not on the agenda. Next slide, please. I'll just jump in while we're waiting for the next slide. And that is reasonable specificity deserves a little time to talk about. And the example that I always use is sometimes there will be a board or a commission who will want our office to train on Open and Public Meetings Act. And so they'll just put on their agenda, Katie Lewis, city attorney, coming for 30 minutes. And if you're a member of the public, you don't know what Katie Lewis, city attorney, is going to talk about. And so you might really carve out some time in your day to go and hear that presentation. And you might be sorely disappointed if it's the annual Open Meetings Act training. So that's why it's important to put enough on the agenda that the public knows what the public body is going to talk about, so that they know whether or not they want to engage. So then the next item is, the council can hold emergency meetings in which they don't have to post 24 hours in advance. And I've just lost my slide, but I'll keep on going. There we go. And the reason for that is if there is something that's happening where really there's an unforeseen circumstance that requires the council to meet with less than 24 hours notice, then there's just sort of do the best you can to post the notice, make sure the majority of council members approve the holding of the meeting, And then you can actually both hold the meeting and take final action as an emergency meeting. Now, sometimes we get questions, what is an emergency meeting? And it's a high standard because 24 hours is a pretty small amount of time to have to give notice. So we really view an emergency as truly an emergency. There's something that's happening in the city that requires immediate action and less than 24 hours notice. Next slide, please. Okay, so now we're going to talk about when the public body can close meetings. And like I said before, there are limited exceptions to that. Next slide. And the reason that the exceptions are limited, of course, is that the council, the Utah legislature really has a preference, correctly, for public bodies to do most of their business in public. And so they've created a small number of exceptions of when the council can convene and discuss things without the public component. Next slide, please. So here's a list of some of the reasons why the council can close a public meeting. I'm not going to go through all of them, but what I will say is that sometimes there might be more than one reason to close. So it might be pending and reasonably imminent litigation and a real property acquisition. Those two might be tied up all in one topic, or there might be two separate reasons within one closed session to talk about it. And then there's also the advice of legal counsel, and that typically is going to be someone from my office giving specific advice to you all about a legal matter. Next page, slide, sorry. And if the council wants to go into closed session, then there are specific procedures. They first have to be in an open meeting with a quorum present, and two-thirds of the council must be present and approve the closing. And you all do a great job. You've done this, multiple times in 2022, where the council publicly announces the reason for entering into closed session. And it doesn't have to be, I move that we acquire, closed session to acquire property at X specific address. You just have to list the exception generally that is in the Open and Public Meetings Act. And then there needs to be a roll call vote to enter into closed session. Next slide, please. And then going back to transparency and thinking about what happens in a closed meeting versus an open meeting. In an open meeting, the meeting is recorded, and then there are also written minutes that are produced, and the official record of that meeting are the written minutes. But there also is the recording. When you're in a closed meeting, there is, with a few exceptions, always a recording taken, and written minutes are optional. The times when recordings don't have to be kept are if the council is discussing the character, professional competence, or physical or mental health of an individual, or the deployment of security personnel, devices, or systems. And one thing to note is that that recording is a protected record under GRAMA. So what that means is that if a member of the public said, we think that you entered into closed meeting for the wrong purpose, or we think you discussed things in closed meeting that shouldn't have been discussed in that closed session, then they can go through the GRAMA appeal process, as Cindy Lou discussed, and an outside entity will determine whether or not Salt Lake City properly close the meeting and discuss things properly in that closed meeting. So it's really important to be very specific and accurate in the way we close our meetings and what we talk about in those meetings. Next slide, please. Okay, so then the final thing to talk about are electronic meetings. And sometimes those are thought of as two separate things. One of them is what we're doing right now, being in a hybrid meeting where I'm talking to you remotely and there's a quorum that is in person in the anchor location. There also are often questions about text messages or emails or virtual correspondence with a quorum of the public body. So we'll talk a little bit about both of those. Next slide. And the first is the electronic meeting. So let's say you, just exactly what we're doing here, you call or you FaceTime into a meeting. The Open and Public Meetings Act says that there has to be a resolution, rule, or ordinance that allows a majority of a quorum to be physically present at the anchor location. So that's That's what's happening right now. You in fact have a quorum physically present at your anchor location, and the other individuals can meet hybrid. Now, the next thing to talk about is text messages. So in a situation where council members are texting each other during a meeting, and in fact, if you're texting each other in any instances, if you have convened a quorum of the public body and are talking about items over which the council has jurisdiction, then by having those electronic conversations outside of the public eye, that's a violation of the Open and Public Meetings Act. So our advice is to save any correspondence or any communication that you would like to have with your fellow council members in a quorum or a majority, and do that in the public meeting like you are now. Next slide. And I'm actually going to skip over this slide, and I'm going to skip over the next slide because we've had a few. Yeah, thank you. You can stop right there. You will be meeting, and you've already talked in the RDA board, and you'll be talking today about adopting a resolution to ensure the continuation of hybrid meetings. So don't worry about that final slide. You'll have a quick conversation about it with Cindy Lou later on the agenda, and you already did with the RDA board. So then let's talk about public comment and participation in public meetings. So there are some instances when the public is legally allowed, required to, and the city council is legally required to allow public participation. These are public hearings that are required under zoning, bond hearings, or other times when the council must hold a public meeting. Public comments. There are also times when the council can allow public comments that are not legally required. One is what the council does during formal meeting when you hold general comment, and the public can discuss anything that they would like other than what's already been discussed in previous public hearings. And then at the discretion of the chair, if there is somebody who has made a public comment and the chair would like the council to discuss that, even though it's not on the agenda, the council can do so, but cannot take final action on that item until it's put on an agenda. So that's one of those times when an item might not be on the city council's agenda, but a member of the public might have commented on it, and this council might want to have brief follow-up discussion in that meeting and then put the item on an additional agenda later. Next slide, please. And finally, although the Open and Public Meetings Act allows for transparency and the public's access to you all as a public body, that doesn't mean that the public may willfully disrupt a meeting. So the council does have the right to remove an individual if they willfully disrupt a meeting, and if the meeting cannot be conducted in an orderly fashion. Next slide, please. Next slide. So the final thing that I'll say is that the Open and Public Meetings Act does have consequences for violating the act. If someone knowingly violates the closed meeting provisions, that's a Class B misdemeanor, and private individuals can bring a lawsuit for a violation of the act. And one of the things that they can seek is the voiding of a final action that has been taken if it was done in violation of the Open and Public Meetings Act. So, not only is transparency a critical goal of Salt Lake City, but there are also legal consequences for violating these transparency requirements. Next slide, please. And that's all I have. Thank you very much. I'm happy to answer any questions. And again, I apologize for not being there in person today.
Thank you very much, Katie, and thank you, Cindy Lou. Any questions for either one on the grandma or the Open Meetings Act? Going once, twice, no questions. Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Council, we're moving on to item number 5, Economic Development Loan Fund, 43 Bakery, Susel LLC. Roberta's coming up. Allison's on the line. Allison, it's all yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon. This is a economic development fund Economic Development Loan Fund potential loan to a business called 43 Bakery / Streusel. It would be $100,000 at 8.75% interest over 7 years. And they would use that for construction, essentially expansion of the business. I'll turn it over to Roberta for any additional information. And if you have any questions, she'll be the one with the answers.
Thank you, Allison. Good afternoon, council members. Good to be with you. Yes, as Allison mentioned, 43 Bakery is a retail wholesale bakery that started in 2018. You probably know them as Streusel because that was the name for a while, and I think a lot of you guys have tasted their delicious goods. The owner, Andrew Corral, was in and out of, or was working in a lot of the commissary kitchens until this year when he decided that he was growing enough to expand into his own kitchen space. We're really excited about this project where it's located because it's the address is 713 Genesee Avenue, which is about 7th West and 9th South, which is right on the 9-line project area, for the RDA project area. What's equally cool about this is that they are going into an RDA-funded building, the West End development. That's going to bring a lot of much-needed retail and activity, local businesses to the neighborhood. So we're excited to be here to present this loan. And please let me know if you have any questions.
Council, any questions? I think it's a great opportunity, great location.
Yeah.
Looks like, Councilman Mono. Roberta, Allison, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right. Council, moving item number 6, the UDOT I-15 study. And we have Dan Adams and Tiffany Pocock and Shane Marshall. All right, come on up. You can. You're kind of early, aren't you?
Early, yeah.
Early. You don't talk about 3:15.
Yeah. Yeah. Hold on. We will move on to. Yeah.
Tiffany is still coming.
Yeah, I understand. I was realizing that we were also very early, so hold on a second.
Mr. Chair, can we move on to item 7, a tentative break? Thanks.
We're going to take a 15-minute break. Perfect timing. We'll be back at 3:15. bit here and move on to item 10 first, and the ordinance on quorum for electronic meetings. And we have Cindy Lou Trishman at the table.
Thank you. Just a brief summary of the request. Due to state adoption new code, we need a definition for a quorum when an electronic meeting is held by the City Council. What's presented for your review is an ordinance making that adjustment to the definition to allow a council member to attend and participate when making themselves known.
Any questions for Cindy Lou on that? So this is electronic meeting. We have 2 council members on hybrid on the screen. They've made their presence known, so they're part of that quorum. And so we have, at this time, 6 members present at this meeting.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Questions for Cindy Lou?
Is that the whole presentation?
Yes.
Okay, so what does that mean to make our presence known? Just make sure that our name is in the WebEx meeting, or does it need to be a little more specific than that?
So we didn't want to bind anybody to a specific definition besides the point that your presence was made known at the meeting.
Okay.
So presence in the WebEx, audio on the WebEx, camera on in the WebEx. If you're participating electronically, if a roll call is held, you're verbally indicating you're present and there for the vote. So those were ideas generated from my head about what I think that could apply by making yourself known.
Thank you. And then this may be something that we need to look into a little more, but is the opposite also part of the law? For instance, I was remotely attending a meeting recently and had to step away from my computer real quick to deal with something. The reason why I was attending remotely. So I was not actually in the meeting for about 10 minutes, 5 or 10 minutes, but my WebEx was still logged in. Should I have logged out so that my presence was not known at the meeting? Does that make sense? Yeah, what's the best, and maybe that's just a staff question, but
It's a great question, and it's something that comes up as far as the thought process of how we record everyone in the minutes and so forth. If an individual is present in the WebEx meeting, the understanding is that they're there and listening to the meeting, they're engaged in the meeting. If engagement needs to be sidetracked momentarily, that's dependent upon the individual of the next step. Do you want to leave the meeting and log out? If you need to change locations, will you log out and sign back on? Generally, if it's 5 minutes or less because you're changing devices, we don't notate that in the minutes.
Okay. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Cindy Lou. Great questions, Councilman Mono.
And just as a note, this is on for adoption tonight so that we have a definition clear for the 2023 year and forward.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Okay, we're now moving back to item number 6, which is the UDOT I-15 study. We have Dan Adams, Tiffany Pocket, and Shane Marshall. Thank you. Happy New Year. And we'll have their slides coming up on the screen here in a second. And they should be also repeated right there.
Okay.
Tiffany Pocock with UDOT. I'm the project manager.
Dan Adams with the Langdon Group and the study team.
Shane Marshall with Horrocks Engineers with the study team as well.
We're here today to talk about the I-15 EIS study. Do you want me to click through or tell to the next slide? Next slide. Today we wanted to go over the process, what we've been through to date, where we're headed in the future, as well as the alternatives and what they look like today, and how to provide feedback. We are in a public comment period for those alternatives, and then having any questions or discussion that you might have. Next slide. I wanted to start with a study that's been put together called the Long Range Plan by the MPO Metropolitan Planning organization called WFRC. There's tons of acronyms, which is the Wasatch Front Regional Council, put together the long-range plan that considers all transportation and mobility assessments throughout the Wasatch Front. That Wasatch Choice Vision gets put together and is looked at and reviewed every 4 years, and that is where this study was initially identified as the department needs to go in and take an additional look at this corridor, but it is part of a larger planning system. Next slide. And you guys jump in if I miss anything or I want to have any clarifications. And so, as I mentioned, from the long-range plan, we identified this corridor as first and foremost a need. It needs to be reconstructed, but as well as we are looking for a future planning horizon in 2050. So we want to make sure that when we do come in and reconstruct this, it is respectful of what the Wasatch Front will look like in the forthcoming years. So we are following the EIS process. We started this study about a year and a half ago now, where we went out and asked, what are the needs of the corridor? We, as the department, we knew it needs to be reconstructed. We have aging infrastructure in the area. But went out for public comment and did a bunch of technical analysis to understand what the needs are for the corridor. And then over the summer and fall, we did a bunch of additional technical analysis based off of what we heard, what our modeling and travel forecasts look like for the future, and came up with what we call alternatives. And that's where we're at today. We do have a public comment period open currently for those alternatives. I have some additional information on specifically what those kind of look like today, but we're kind of still in the middle of the process. You'll see I'll go over what the next steps are, but we've been through the review of the scoping, we've assessed the needs, we now have alternatives. Next slide. Oh, sorry. I thought this was the next one was the screening, but I'll go back to the screening in a second. But the department's mission is to improve quality of life through transportation. And so what those pillars look like for quality of life are better mobility, good health, connected communities, and strong economy. And we wanted to really make sure at the very beginning of this study that we embrace that vision and make sure that each one of the needs address or look at these quality of life outcomes, as well as thinking about all users. And you'll hopefully see that a lot in our alternatives as we go through that in the presentation. Okay, back to screening, sorry. So we are following, again, the NEPA process. We have gone through what's called level 1 screening, where these alternatives, we think, meet the needs and the quality of life framework from the study. And from here, we'll go and look at what's called level 2 screening, where we look at the natural and built environment, air quality, noise analysis. A lot of refinement happens from here into the next level of screening. So right now, I just wanted to keep remind everybody that we are in alternatives level 1 screening, where we've come to a high level understanding of a general footprint of where we're at for these ideas. Anything on process before I go into our alternatives? This is a corridor-wide kind of view of how we've looked at mobility for all users. I'll hone in kind of on the North Salt Lake and Salt Lake area in a minute, but this is a 17-mile corridor from Farmington to Salt Lake City, so we are looking at every existing and future interchange as we move forward to make sure that it is a part of the community rather than a barrier to it. Oh, I've moved on to the next slide, sorry.
Yeah, you have to tell them to change the slide.
When you see your finger go like this,
Yeah.
there's nothing blank.
There's nothing on the screen here, yeah. Nope, it's blank. Okay. No problem.
Sorry, this is a corridor-wide view from the start in the north at Farmington down to Salt Lake City. It's around 17 miles that we've really looked at making, hopefully, I-15 more of a part of the community rather than a barrier to it. The images on the left are some of the things in the toolbox that we have been using to address all users, slowing things down, making sure everybody can see each other, and understanding that there are several users in the space. Next slide.
back up one just real?
Yeah.
So just to kind of set the stage a little bit, prior to getting to this point, we walked.
Sorry, can I just have you move a little closer to the mic or pull the mic
I
closer?
should know
Thank
better
you,
than
Shane.
that. Sorry about that. Before we got to this point, before we came up with alternatives, we walked these intersections, interchanges with the community. Councilmember Wharton was with us when we walked 6 North from one side of I-15 to the other side of I-15, tried to understand what those needs were from a community perspective. All of that information has gone into what you're going to see as Tiffany moves forward. So a lot of outreach has been done with the community to figure out what the context is and what type of solutions and needs are out there today.
Next slide, please. Oh, that slide, yep. First, I'll talk about what the alternatives are for I-15, and then I'll go over what we've looked at for additional crossings. We have 2 options pertaining to I-15. The first option is a 5-lane section with a high occupancy toll lane in each direction, or what we call the express lanes today. And then the second option is Option B, which are reversible high occupancy toll lanes in the center. They are separated by barrier. Next slide.
One question here
Yeah.
on the auxiliary lane. Define that.
What's an auxiliary lane?
Yes.
So an auxiliary lane is when it's not corridor wide, but whenever there are ramps too close together, we'll just keep that lane together so that we don't have the safety issue of weaving. So that lane doesn't exist all the time. It's just whenever 2 ramps are too close together, we just keep that lane open.
Okay. It's not like a BRT lane or anything else like that case. Gotcha.
No.
Yeah. Also, how does this compare to what is currently there?
In Salt Lake City,
I mean, I'd like to advocate for the entirety of the I-15, but yes, particularly in places where eminent domain might be used on my neighbors.
generally in Salt Lake City, this is one extra lane. 1 in each direction.
The corridor varies so significantly from number of lanes from one end to the other. So this would make it more consistent, but generally in the Salt Lake City area, it's 1 additional lane. From a width perspective, though, I think you mentioned eminent domain. One question I was hoping to ask you all before we walked in here today, give us some context of what you thought this project was. Was it this? Was it this? Like, there's been a lot of talk about what this project is, and we aren't at the level of an impact analysis yet. Right? We're going to get into that as we move forward. But so it's this wide today. It's about this wide tomorrow. Most of this work occurs in the middle. If you drive, especially through the 6 North area, that median there is very, very wide. So most of this work, 85% of this work goes to the middle. There's very little expansion on the outside. So
in Salt Lake City.
In Salt Lake City. Again, it's a corridor-wide perspective, right? And it changes if you go up further to the north, you have UP and UTA on one side, so you have to move that other way. But in this area, there's a lot of median that we can use for a future lane. So it does not get much wider, but it does go to the middle.
I appreciate that, and I respect that is your reality and UDOT's reality. But like for my constituents in Guadalupe, like this much more of I-15 is like the total width of their neighborhood.
Totally.
You know, when you not what you're adding, but that plus what already exists is about as wide as Guadalupe is. And the concern that is going to be borne mostly in Guadalupe is really concerning to them. And so like this, you know, makes a huge difference. And that's what I'm most worried about. And especially that, you know, those areas like Argyle Court, where, you know, people already can reach outside and touch I-15. And those projects were part of NeighborWorks projects that, you know, what's the plan for Argyle Court?
I think it's also worth noting that the community is demonstration of resilience to the last time the highway decided to cut through the city. Sure. There is a 103-year-old woman who lives at the intersection of 5th West and 4th North. We all call her Grandma Molly. She gave up her house for the original 15 and is living in a house that is in the impacted area should we do that tiny expansion again. So I think that's also worth noting in this community.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the reality that they're coming at it with. I don't think there's any way that they're going to view this as community building, even though we did walk that bridge, and that bridge is in huge need of re-engineering and rebuilding. But I would like to hear more details about what you think. I know we're still in the planning stages, and I do also appreciate UDOT extending the period of time for feedback on this. But what are your plans for that area of Guadalupe?
Maybe we go to the next couple slides. It would, I think it would help answer the question, then we can specifically talk about that, if that helps. Oh, sorry. Yep. Okay.
Thanks.
I know.
Do you want me to just go back into the interchanges, or
I would just, touch on.
you guys care about the reversible lanes or any of that information? Because I can skip through it in the interest of time if that's, so in the North Salt Lake Woods Cross area, we are, oh, sorry, next slide. Next slide.
Oh, wait, I think it jumped. Oh, there you go.
There you go.
Yeah.
So in the Woods Cross, North Salt Lake area, we are looking at a new, a combined intersection. As you guys may or may not be aware, that throughout this corridor, there's kind of a spaghetti bowl of weird interchanges, and so we're trying to consolidate. I call it a new interchange, but really it's taking Warm Springs and making it look more like a traditional interchange. And so that takes a lot of pressure off of the 600 North interchange, where right now there's a lot of trucks coming from the industry, gravel and refineries that are the easiest way to get onto I-15 right now is 600 North. And so we heard that when we walked and when we talked to both North Salt Lake and Salt Lake, and we heard that, hey, industry needs to get onto I-15 as quickly as possible. So that's why you see now an easier, more direct route to get there, so that we can do more community enhancements for all users down at 600 North. That's why I wanted to point that one out. Next slide. This is just the second option for where that interchange lines up, but next slide. These are in Salt Lake, the minor arterials that cross I-15, making sure that we enhance the walking, biking improvements there as well. So it's outside of the interchanges. Next slide. Okay, so we're into Salt Lake option A, which is a diamond interchange. What you see today is a spooey. And what we've learned both nationally and here in Utah, that a traditional diamond interchange really helps slow cars and vehicles down. It makes directions more anticipated by both the vehicles and the pedestrians. And so again, we heard that this is used by walkers and bikers today, and we know that it's terribly uncomfortable and scary. And so that's why we added the pressure relief valve up north to get all those trucks out of the city, and really trying to make sure that 600 North is what the community is asking us for it to look like. It also provides better access to the Rose Park community by having full access there at 1000 North.
So back to the definitions. You mentioned the spooey intersection and you mentioned the diamond intersection, and realize we're
so a spooey interchange is another acronym for single point urban interchange. So you have one signal, all the ramps come together. It looks exactly like it looks today. That's a spooey.
On 600 North.
On 600 North.
But we don't all know, and the public listening doesn't all know what it looks like now. So is it the thing where you're crossing the intersections in ways that are surprising to some people? Is it?
No.
Or is it just you're in the right-hand lane, you go to the right if you want to go.
We also have our in-house expert here. Maybe he can translate it into terms we understand at home.
But you said, so 600 North, you said there's one light in the middle of 601 North, right?
Correct.
Okay.
So the signal goes across. So if you're coming northbound off of I-15 and you get on the off-ramp of 6, you come up the top, you can turn left or right. A SPUI is just that, it's just a left or a right. The more complicated ones, they're called diversion diamonds. That's not proposed here. That's where you kind of get on the wrong side of the road to make that left. That's not what we're talking about here. This is a simple single point place where one green light, you turn left, you turn right.
Okay.
We're evaluating that, and we're evaluating a diamond, which is even, you pull up to that crossroad, and there's 2 signals, one for each ramp, one for each side of the interchange. So there's either 2 signals or 1 signal.
And right now you're in the
evaluation.
In the evaluation period. Gotcha.
And is it the addition of more lights that slows it down? Because as dangerous as that 600 North Bridge is, even more dangerous is the 800 West, 600 North interchange, and the 900 West, 600 interchange. We just had a teenager T-boned there and, sent to the hospital in critical condition. So is it the lights, or is it the way it's laid out that slows people down? What's the logic there?
The geometry, because we can make things more perpendicular and rather than kind of, because sweeping right turns, I apologize, I keep using the what's there today. Right now, the geometry is laid out for the convenience of vehicles. We have tried, that's why I wanted to showcase that toolbox that we're using to line up geometry more in a perpendicular manner where cars are forced to slow down. They don't get these sweeping movements anymore where they can maintain their speed and continue on to those intersections that you were talking about.
Right. So
those intersections are outside our study area, but we are trying, we have heard that speed's a problem and we need to slow down.
Right. So yeah, you have to make a 90-degree turn to go right instead of these big sweeping, we used to call them California rights, where you maintain your speed and just kind of, gotcha. Okay.
Yeah, today you would come up again northbound and you would turn right and you wouldn't stop. You would just keep on turning, right? In the future, the proposal has you stopping before you make that right turn.
All right. Thank you. That's helpful. I think that not only just us, but hopefully the general public. Thank you.
No, absolutely. So this is option A. The second one is, as we were explaining, the SPUI concept. And the interchange to the north moves a little farther south. But those are kind of the major differences between option A and option B in Salt Lake City.
Oh, pedestrian, yeah.
And with it, when we do a, thank you, Shane, when we do a SPUI in the study area, because we do know that the geometry is a little more favorable to vehicles, we have created a grade separated option for those who would prefer not to deal with, or their comfort level would be to kind of not be interacting with the vehicles. So those are thank you, that was another kind of concept that we've gone through for the whole corridor.
So if you were walking or biking east-west along 6th, you would cross over or under the ramps and over I-15. You would not interact with the cars.
Mr. Chair.
Go ahead.
So am I understanding it right? There's 2 options for the 600 North. It's either maintain the single point urban intersection or change it to, is it called diverging diamond? Is that the same thing?
In this case, it's just a diamond.
Just a regular diamond. Okay. Yep. All right. Thanks.
With the SPUI, we do have a grade separated option, but with the traditional diamond, we do have larger buffered bike lanes, larger sidewalks, so that it's not just not that we still have options for walkers and bikers and scooters, and any mode you choose, you can hopefully find a space for yourself. Some other things we've looked at are creating new connections, both at 5th North and 4th North. Oh, sorry, next slide. New connections under I-15 at 5th and 4th. 5th would be a walker, biker, scooter connection, so no cars. And at 4th, it would be all users. We also, because of the new configuration of the ramps and consolidating them along I-15, we are able to reduce the number of lanes on Beck Street and create a shared use path that connects North Salt Lake to Salt Lake on Beck Street.
Sorry, just 500 North, this would be a whole new separate bridge going across 500 North.
Could be under
500,
Under 5th and under 4th.
Under I-15.
Under I-15. Oh, okay, gotcha. Okay.
Both 4th and 5th go under.
Under,
I-15.
right, okay. Yeah, my geometry, I don't drive that drive anymore.
Today you can't, it's just, yep.
Yep. And both those ideas were from the comments that came in early. We're looking at increasing east-west connectivity. It has been interesting in the public meetings and things we've had with alternatives that people that live close to the freeway are not thrilled about that.
Yeah.
They're not excited about it becoming open, because right now with it basically as a cul-de-sac, they like it having a nice quiet street. And so that's, it's been really interesting, the conversations around that.
We also have a history on the west side of overpasses becoming places where they hang out, and lighting is a problem, and so.
Yeah, yeah.
Does that?
But the farther away you go, the more people really like it.
Yeah, that community in particular is one that has not historically been very heard, and they are determined to be heard this time, and I support them. They've sacrificed once. We're gonna.
And the participation there has been fantastic. I mean, really great. We've been able to have multiple meetings in the neighborhood. Really good turnout, lots of really good visits. Another concern too is the train tracks there, that if you would go through at 4 or 500, you then hit the railroad. And then a lot of comments also about that 300 is just a block away and is open now, so.
Can I ask conceptually, as we're determining what the actual need is, are we projecting an increased dependence on any public transit? And this is population growth plus public transit growth that we're projecting?
Yes, both of those.
That's why we wanted to talk about the long-range plan at the very beginning, because I-15 isn't the only study or the only effort that's going on for the growth. UTA is also studying Front Runner literally as we speak. They're also doing comment periods and going through the environmental process like we are.
And will the decision-making be in sync for those two concepts?
Yeah, so we haven't done a good job of explaining that it's not this or that. It's not I-15 or transit, it's both. In order to solve the long-range transportation problem that we have experienced along the way, it takes both of those.
Well, and it just feels a little bit like a neighbor that's already sacrificed for efficiency would be asked to once again subsidize suburban sprawl by giving up more of their acreage, the city to give up more of its acreage, so that people could live further away and have more reliance on a car. And that doesn't seem like an awesome value proposition for the capital city that is the economic engine for the state. So I'm struggling with that concept and really just wanting to push people onto Front Runner and get our transit system, more robust so we can depend on it better.
Sure.
So staying with that same vein, so my question I was holding off on was the same expansion and UTA on, I know Front Runner, but also BRTs and the using of BRTs only lanes. Is that part of the discussion, or that's still with the concept of the HOV or HOT lane? Or
the background assumption is everything that UTA's planned is built.
Successful.
And successful. So Front Runner, BRTs, Everything they have in their long-range plan is built. Then what is left to accommodate for I-15? So that's the need that we're trying to accommodate, is everything, after everything's built, what's left over, and that's why you see 5 lanes, 5+1 lanes on I-15 and not 8, 9, and 10, because there is a dependence on transit in the future. You without that, you would see a much wider I-15, but we don't need that because there is a robust transit system in the background of our study.
Right, because UDOT is already, UTA is already expanding the second line so that they can increase the front runner capacity across the board.
UTA is currently studying double tracking as well as electrification is in the long range plan as well.
Right. Gotcha. Okay, thank you.
I think the point, that Shane and Tiffany are both making, if there's one thing to take away from today, it's that in looking to 2050, that all the technical work that's being done on this study is making that assumption that all of those transit ideas are built and are successful, like Tiffany said. I think that's so important because it kind of has turned into an either-or proposition, and that's not correct. It is looking at all modes of transportation. And then in addition, like on this study, not just I-15, but as Tiffany shared, like all these things with bike and ped access, doing whatever we can do to improve all those at the interchanges and help with that access. So.
Because as I mentioned, when we first looked at this corridor, because it's aging, it's old, it needs to be reconstructed. We've done some rehabilitation throughout the years, but some of the pavement in this corridor is the original I-15. So if we do need to go in and reconstruct this, how does it need to look for the community? That's why we've taken 600 North so seriously, because we have heard so much about it.
Thank you. Go ahead, Councilman Petro.
It feels to me like this is the right time for us to dream boldly. We are in the middle of a massive growth trajectory. We are going to get the Olympics. There is infrastructure dollars available at a federal level in unprecedented numbers. Have we considered a non-traditional option that feels super viable and would address endless concerns from my constituents about potentially burying? In my conceptualization there's the 23 North exit, which is industrial, that would have to stay at grade. But I mean, just south of there and then coming up just before the Spaghetti Bowl at like 13 South, you would reduce PM 2.5 directly into homes. You would reduce the sound issues. You could create land that the state could reclaim and monetize to offset whatever costs there would be. Please not with truck-served warehouses. I know y'all like to give them to us. No more of those. But I mean, this feels like a very forward-looking. My friend was just in Santiago, Chile. I mean, that's considered a developing nation, and they have a buried highway, and they have a similar terrain. I get that the water tables are high, but we just buried a central tunnel out at the airport, and engineering at this magnitude can compensate for those sorts of issues. Are we dreaming boldly and looking for those avant-garde, really setting a trend for where the city needs to be in 2050 kind of solutions?
We have heard, and we have initially looked at basically nationwide. There are several other states that are doing similar. Similar is probably not a fair word. This is a little bit of a unique corridor, and because we do have, it's basically at grade right now. There are some logistics that we would need to look at what this looks like today versus the impact to build a buried freeway. The community could look very, very different compared to the impacts we're talking about.
I would love to support any of that bold visioning. Utah deserves better than just more.
Sure.
As our bright strategic plan, right? We could do something transformative here that could be really amazing.
So we've heard that feedback over the last month or so, and we are looking at what it would take and what it would look like. I think if you went like that, it makes a ton of sense. It's getting from here to there
I lived in Boston. The big dig is still a trauma everyone
100.
Carries. I get it.
As soon as we say something like this, big dig comes to mind.
Yes.
And like Tiffany said, in a lot of these cases, the freeway has been depressed before you get there, and so you just cover the freeway. We'd have to get the freeway depressed in this circumstance. So there's one of two options, well, three: tunnel, like the Big Dig. You build something to the right or to the left of I-15, which is really impactful for the community. Like you said, Guadalupe is right there today, and we don't want to get any closer. Or you close I-15 and dig it all out and then do it. So it's pretty substantial, but we are looking at it to see what are the ramifications.
Yeah, we're Utahns.
Dreaming
We stand on mountaintops and envision things that weren't there. We can do this again. We're good at this.
We will at least have the information available to say, here's what it would look like. So yes, appreciate that feedback. And I think that what we've taken away, I think, from this initial outreach is that the impacts to the community, whether it's this much or this much, a foot or two, matters a great deal. And so what we're right now putting that on paper and saying, okay, how do we avoid? Can we avoid whatever is out there with either alternative? And so at some point we'll come back and say, this is what it looks like on paper. Now, not just this cross-section that Tiffany showed you, because it's really hard to give context about where this goes. Is it north? Is it east? Is it west? Where does it actually go? But we'll come back and say, all right, given this is what the impacts will look like. But we've heard very loud and clear that every inch matters. And we've taken that serious, and we'll go back and do some homework and be able to inform you exactly what the impacts would look like.
Slide.
Yeah, keep going, you're good.
We're good. If you're good,
Yeah, thank you.
We did release the alternatives publicly on November 10th, and the week after, we had a series of open houses that we were happy with the attendance, and like Shane has been saying, we've been getting a lot of good feedback over the next month, and so we've got still a lot of work to do. Public comment. Oh, next slide. Sorry. The public comment period did get extended to January 13th, so about 10 more days. This is all of the contact information to get a hold of me and my team. So please.
You don't, right? Thank you. I apologize. I just wanted to, I'm sorry. Thank you.
Where we go from here, again, the comment period will close mid-January. From here, our team will take all of that feedback, produce, and just so everybody is aware, because you did give a comment doesn't mean you will get a direct response, but we will be, if you did provide your email address and some sort of contact, we will be giving you an update saying, here is, we're going to be putting together what's called a kind of a alternative screening memo saying, here's the general themes that we've heard and, what our kind of responses are, or what we're going to be looking at in response to your comments. And we will do that next level 2 screening. We're going to be looking at air quality, the impacts to the natural and built environment, what we heard. We may have gotten some new ideas where, hey, we would rather, I want to see a barrier protected bike lane rather than a buffered bike lane. Those are the things that we'll be kind of looking at and come back with another public comment period in the fall, where we'll have more of that information, as Shane mentioned, to review. And then what's next is called the final EIS. And then from there, in the spring of 24, we anticipate the study to be complete.
Okay, I just want to clarify, there will be another opportunity once you, I'm asking this question for myself and for the people listening. So you will come out with a plan and say, this is what we're pretty sure we're going to do. And then there will be another comment period for people to comment on that. Because what I'm hearing from constituents right now is frustration that they're giving feedback, and then the answer from UDOT, which I totally see both sides of this. You're trying to say we're going to take that into consideration, but they're hearing, I want you to say yes or no whether my house is going to be gone. So there will be that other opportunity for them to give feedback once you say, we're 90% sure this is what we're going with. Is that right?
Yes, but if there is a constituent that is interested in speaking with us at any time, it doesn't need to be today or before the 13th, and you are a property owner in the corridor, reach out to us. There is a very individualistic process for business and property owners throughout the corridor. I am not an expert on that process, so I'm already treading on unknown territory here, but it is, please reach out to us, and there is a process, and we will be working with those constituents.
Okay, so the Grandma Molly's of Rose Park and the families on Argyle Court, if they want to sit down and meet with you, they can do that.
Absolutely.
Can we make sure that Chris Alejandro and I have that directly from you? We share the Fair Park Community Council, which is one that would be bisected by this. And then also we need to, Chris and I share the Rose Park Community Council, and we'd like to make sure that we reiterate that to them at the community councils this month.
I heard an ask there, but I'm not sure that
Can I make sure I have that information about, maybe not today, like maybe you have to go back, but can we get,
that right there.
it's just this here?
Yeah, contact us.
Just this, okay, perfect.
And on the, if you can't remember those, whatever, just Google I-15 EIS, first thing
And then we
pops
can
up.
tell our constituents that they can request an individual meeting.
Yep.
Through this avenue, okay, thank
And
you.
it doesn't have to be by January 13th.
No, that can be
Perfect.
any time during the study.
Perfect, thank you.
Yeah, in fact, we would much rather if something comes up over the next year. Sometimes when these things go into the technical analysis time, things are kind of quiet. And then people get thoughts and ideas and theories, just call us or shoot us an email, and we're
And
happy
we do
to
have
help
planned
out.
engagement opportunities between now and the fall. We're not, we're not.
Okay, good, I just want to make sure I'm telling the constituents
Yeah,
that accurate things. If I tell them they can have a meeting and they can't, I'll be roasted.
I think we didn't fully address Councilperson Wharton's question early on about Guadalupe, what's going to happen there. I think when Shane was giving an answer to another thing he was talking about, where we're at in that process, about we're now going to start doing that analysis, looking at what those impacts might be, doing everything we can to avoid any impacts. So I don't know that we have like an exactly, it is this many feet or this many homes, when we do not have that yet. And so
No, that's what we're doing going forward over the next few months. We'll find out exactly what those inches look like, where those inches occur, and be able to report back about what those impacts look like. What's interesting is an impact means a lot of things to a lot of different people. And we will have a physical footprint. How that impacts that person's their yard or whatever, we'll have to have those conversations, and that's why that this is an ongoing dialogue. This is the public comment period, yes, but there will be individual conversations between now and any decision that is made. And again, there has not been a decision made in either way.
And that's why the process is very individualistic too, because every property owner is different. Their needs are different. And so we as the state may need to be just in your backyard to build the physical I-15, or we might need more of your land. Those are all different conversations too that we're going to have, and we welcome it and them at any point.
And one last technical question. I hope you didn't answer this when I had to run in the other room just then. Will the final EIS and the record of decision come out at the same time? Okay. Yes.
Yes,
you said yes.
I was thinking of draft.
They are combined. So we'll have a draft that we'll have public comment on, and that is sometime this next year. And then the combined ROD and final will come out after that.
Got it.
But there'll be an opportunity to comment on the draft, and then we'll have a final.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, the draft will have, sorry, I may have mixed that up. The draft is the next kind of big milestone, and it will have a public meetings like we had. It also has a public hearing.
All the impacts
that
associated
goes
with
with
the
it, everything, and we'll take then, the opportunity to comment, participate. And then we then go hear all those comments, and then you come out with the final and then the record of decision, yeah.
Got it. Okay.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
That's great conversation, great discussion. I look forward to the future discussions. And it was kind of nice to hear, that the UDOT, UTA discussions are working together because we always wanted to say one's going on and one's not going on, and you get one or you get two, but so you get A or B. So I appreciate that very much, because I'm all in favor of public transportation and not just building extra roads. And I think, we all need to make sure that our mindset's changing that way. So appreciate it very much. Thanks a lot, and look forward to the next time we talk about spuies and diamonds.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Moving on to item number 8, we got the electric vehicle readiness off-street parking stall amendment. We got Sophia and Peter here, and Sam. There's Sam on the screen. It's all yours, Sam.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Just 4 things to know about the item in front of you, the EV readiness ordinance. First, the city already requires 1 out of 25 off-street parking spaces on multifamily projects to be configured with an EV charging station. So that's the existing regulation. The proposal in front of you would add to that requirement, not replace it necessarily, to say that 20% of the total stalls, so 1 out of 5, would need to be wired to support a future charging station. However, the ordinance in front of you does not require station installation, only the wiring for a station for that 20% threshold. Number 3, the requirement would apply to multifamily residential projects like condos or apartment buildings. And last, the Planning Commission did forward this with a positive recommendation. With that, I'd ask to turn it over to the department. Thank you.
Thank you, Sam.
Thanks, Sam. Thanks, everyone. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
So we have a presentation. If you want to see it, we don't need to do it, but it is something that Peter here has prepared. It was the presentation we gave to the Planning Commission. So we're happy to go through it. We can do as much of it as you'd like and then take questions, of course. So
Yeah, let's just quickly go through that, because we probably have some questions when you go through it. And so the computer screen's not working there, but the big one's up there. But you'll have to switch. Tell us to switch.
Yeah, sounds good. Thank you. All right, so good afternoon, everyone. I'm happy to be presenting this ordinance proposal to you all here today. My name is Peter Nelson, and I'm a program manager with the Department of Sustainability, and I've been working on this policy proposal since late 2020 and presenting it to various stakeholders, as well as facilitating public comment periods up to this point. So this is a policy proposal that we in sustainability are particularly excited about, as it will help us achieve several of Salt Lake City's sustainability goals, including improving air quality and reducing future greenhouse gas emissions, and doing so in a way that enables accessibility to these solutions for more of our residents. So go ahead and move on, Tim. So for this afternoon's briefing on the proposal, I'll be providing some background on what we mean by EV readiness in contrast to current electric vehicle policy. I'll touch on the environmental and economic benefits that this proposed policy addresses. And finally, I'll go over provisions included in the policy proposal change. Next slide, Sam. So first, let's touch on the 3 common levels of EV charging infrastructure. There's EV capable, EV ready, which is what the subject of this policy proposal is, and EVSE installed, or electric vehicle supply equipment with the charger installed. Next slide, Tim. EV capable means including sufficient electrical panel capacity and a dedicated branch circuit and continuous raceway to the site of the future EV parking space. Next slide, Sam. EV ready, which is what this policy proposal entails, goes beyond including conduit to terminate in junction box or 2-volt charging outlet. Next slide. And then lastly, we have EV supply equipment installed, which means that the space includes an EV charger fully installed. Next slide. So this policy being proposed by the Sustainability Department concerns the EV readiness scenario. Next. Oh, great. So, no, I'm sorry, Sam, will you go back just one more? Thank you. Salt Lake City's existing EV policy proposal for multifamily new construction includes a requirement that for every 25 parking spaces included in the project, one must include a fully installed EV charging station.
Yeah, I would like to, so 1 per 25 required spaces, and it looks like I saw a brief glimpse of the next slide. It said 1 in 5, but that's still on the required spaces.
Yeah, so right now what this slide is covering is what is currently our existing on the books EV.
I started my question a little too early, but I'll just say the question because I would prefer that if it possible, we say it 1 in 5 or whatever percentage we say of no matter how many they build, because we have a lot of zones that have, we have some zones that have 0 parking minimum, but developers are still choosing to build parking lots. And so if it's based on the required parking spaces, that will require them to do 0 parking spaces. And I think it should be based on how many they choose to build. Mm-hmm. And I'm wondering if we can get some input on if that's possible.
Yeah, and I believe in the ordinance, we have some language that specifies instances in which there's 4 or fewer parking spaces or greater than 4. But I think that, sure, we can go back to that. We'll move on to the next slide. Okay, so in addition to the existing EV policy for multifamily new construction, this proposal, EV readiness ordinance, stipulates that 20% of required parking spaces be constructed EV ready. So now let's shift into the rationale or the why behind this proposal.
Sorry, back to Councilman Monos. Sure. I'm a little bit slower than that he is. So currently we require EV not ready, one spot per 25. EV
fully installed.
Fully installed.
Yeah.
Fully installed. 1 per 25 fully installed.
Correct.
The proposed would just be 20% EV ready. Would there still be the 1 per 25?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So it would be an addition.
In addition, the 20% in addition to the 1 per. Okay.
Yes.
All right. Okay. Thank you.
Great. So we'll move on to the next slide. So looking at market size and demand for EV charging, as of 2020, there were 1,043 electric vehicles registered in Salt Lake City alone. And this data was provided to us by the Utah State Tax Commission in February of 2020. And it's worth noting that this same data request provided in February of 2019 showed electric vehicle registrations of 780. So that means that in a single year, EV registrations rose by 33% in Salt Lake City zip codes. Move on to the next slide. Looking more broadly at EV adoption across Utah, this graphic represents electric vehicle registrations statewide over the past decade. In 2015, there were 1,129 vehicles registered versus the nearly 7,000 when this graphic was created in 2020. As of the end of 2021, the number of EV registrations in Utah was at 10,789, and that's more than 800% increase since 2015. So obviously, we're seeing a rapid growth in adoption of EVs here in Salt Lake City and in the state as a whole. Next slide. As EV adoption continues to grow, demand for EV charging grows with it. And it's at a point in time in which this necessary EV charging infrastructure is consequential from a financial perspective. Research gathered by the Sustainability Department indicate that the cost of adding EV-ready infrastructure at the time of new construction will greatly reduce the cost it would need to occur in a retrofit scenario. So multifamily projects that do not take action to accommodate demand for EV charging face the risk of their asset becoming less attractive or even less viable to residents who will rely on the availability of charging their EVs where they live. As EV charging transitions from an amenity to an essential feature of multifamily properties, those residential properties not equipped to accommodate EV charging bear the risk of devaluation in the market. Another undesirable alternative to not including EV readiness infrastructure at the time of construction is in a retrofit scenario, which involves costly actions such as demolition and trenching, repair of parking surfaces and walls, and upgrades to electrical services and soft costs such as permits and inspections. Next slide. And just as critical as ensuring that that charging infrastructure is in place is making sure it's available where it's needed most, and that's where we live. A 2015 study by the Idaho National Laboratory found that approximately 85% of charging events take place at home. Next slide. The same study found that even those with access to workplace charging, the at-home charging events accounted for approximately 61% on average. While residents of single-family homes largely have access to charging at home, the access is extremely limited in multifamily properties. So the proposed EV readiness ordinance helps create home-based charging opportunities for residents that live in multifamily dwellings where EV charging is often less accessible. This is particularly relevant in consideration to the context of Salt Lake City's pronounced growth in multifamily housing. According to a KEMC Gardner Institute report from 2019, 91% of residential building permits in the 5 years prior had been for multifamily housing. And I think we can agree that that has pretty much stayed consistent since then. Next slide. So what's presented thus far, anticipating and changing transportation markets, future-proofing against costly retrofits and compromised multifamily assets, represent just some of the economic benefits of EV readiness. Go to the next slide. Enabling accessible EV charging is an important opportunity to meet Salt Lake City's air quality and climate positive 2040 goals as well. In November 2016, the City Council and the Mayor adopted a joint resolution establishing renewable energy and carbon emissions reduction goals for Salt Lake City. This included in the resolution was a community carbon emissions reduction goal of 80% by 2040. Reductions in emissions from energy use in the transportation are specifically cited in the resolution, which includes on-road emissions from private vehicles. On-road transportation sector accounts for 20% of greenhouse gas emissions in Salt Lake City, contributing to air pollution and climate change and threatening the health and well-being of residents and visitors in Salt Lake City. And then in January 2021, the City Council and Mayor Mendenhall adopted a joint electrified transportation resolution. And this proposed ordinance aligns directly with the resolution by expanding adoption of electric vehicle charging technology, expanding EV charging infrastructure, accelerating EV adoption rates, and supporting the inclusive development of clean transportation opportunities for Salt Lake City community members. So thanks very much. That concludes kind of the overview of the presentation, but I'd love to hear some questions.
Councilmember Mono.
Thank you. Thanks for the presentation. I'm really excited about what I believe are the intentions of this. I think that it's right. My questions are, is it going far enough? And a couple specific things. You showed that graph of EV adoption, like licensed registered EVs in the state of Utah, and I don't think that that upward curve is going to slow down anytime soon. So how far into the future, actually let me ask a more basic question. Was the 1 in 5 EV ready stalls based on anything, or was it just like a clean round number that seemed like reasonable to request of developers? Or did we actually look at like, okay, if in this many years, 50% of the cars built are electric vehicles, how many stalls are needed in multifamily building, understanding that they could probably, rotate when they're using the thing. So maybe even if 100% of the cars are electric, you don't need 100% of them to be charging stalls. But how far in the future does this get us?
So that's a kind of a best practice number, and so that's cited quite a bit, including from SWEEP, which is the Southwest Energy Efficiency Project. It's an organization similar to Utah Clean Energy, but serving western states. And the thing about 20% is that they were looking at how much mileage you would drive an electric vehicle or any vehicle for that matter in day to day. and what it would take to charge that. And so part of their recommendation comes from the fact that just having that electrical capacity that can serve 20% of parking stalls, that actually would enable enough of a charging load that could be transitioned across 100% of those stalls. So it gets into a scenario you're talking about where they might have to go through some sort of arrangement where there are certain times when people can park, but that 20% of capacity, at least from the electricity standpoint, would be able to charge 100% of the vehicles in a meaningful
And
way.
I imagine, oh, sorry. Can I keep going? I imagine there may be a point in the future where there's a group of tenants that say, look, we don't have enough chargers installed. Our ordinance has required them to make that ready. Is it possible for us, and this may be a theoretical legal question, but is it possible for us in the future to say, hey, your building was built so it can be ready. We are now going to flip a switch and you must install them, or something to that effect, because the cost of installing it after it's ready should be very, very small. And a parallel question is, why not just ask them to install 20% right now? Because all of the conduit and the power and everything else is the more expensive part. The actual box that they put in with the cord is far less expensive than all the rest of that. So why not just make them install 20%?
I think it's just that finding that right line that we want to be on for this point in time, right? Like, we want to make sure we have enough demand. We want to make sure we're balancing their needs with cost and their feedback around that, with that future proofing. And you're right, the infrastructure cost is by far the most expensive piece of it. So that's the short answer. But I don't know the legal question. But in looking at the analysis that we've done just on our own infrastructure needs, it's by far the just that conduit laying and when you're building a building, it's a lot cheaper. So that's why we kind of landed on that. And as Peter mentioned, that best practice number, there's a number of other cities that have adopted the same EV ready ordinance of 20%. Chicago, Atlanta. I'm not going to get them all, but anyway, yeah, we can look it up for you. But.
And one last thing, and I promise I'll stop. I do want to go back to the first question I asked. I would like to see this come back to us with the requirement of 1 in 25 installed and 1 in 5 ready on the number of stalls that are built, not the number of stalls that are required. And that seems like something that maybe isn't super intuitive, but that's a huge difference in many, many cases. So I think the point is that the building can in the future service, sounds like 100% of the residents with EV cars. That would be dependent on the number that is installed, not the number that is required. So
thank you.
If I could request that change, I would like to see that change, or at least an option to vote on that change.
Yeah, that's good feedback. Thank you.
And
I support that. This is Amy. I support that. That's all.
Thank you, Councilmember Fowler. I had on the 20% in the study, I drive an EV and the time you charge is at night. So, and it's not going to be for 4 hours. It's going to be for
overnight,
8-10 hours.
Yeah.
So, the study is probably a lot smarter than I am, and they realize that. But I just go, yeah, is this a time where we push it a little bit further, where we say not 20%, but more than that? Because again, in 2030, 2040, we could be, okay, we have a lot more drivers, and now they're fighting over who gets a spot because it's 10 hours. They're sitting there for 10 hours.
Yeah, and what the analysis that they did was based on those vehicles with much larger batteries that go further in a day, and they looked at the average miles people drive in a day, and you don't normally need to charge it to 100% every night. So I think EV 20% would get you to like a 60% charge overnight. It could accommodate 100% of the people getting 60% of their batteries charged.
Right, and then they can charge it at work. So I appreciate the study and the information on that, and I really applaud this work, because I think it's exciting to do this. Pushing it across the envelope here, and
thank you.
Looking for our air quality. So
Can I just ask clarifying? So you're suggesting that there's at least one that's ready to go, being built, and then 1 and 5 is ready after that.
One is actually built, you can actually
Okay.
plug in.
And the rest is just, because I was just thinking, like,
That's what the ordinance
if we were to
says.
compare the socioeconomic status of those moving into the places on North Temple, I'm pretty sure they're not the Tesla buyers right now. They're probably struggling to qualify for that loan to buy the electric vehicles until the price point comes down or wages rise, one or the other. And so forcing too much parking right now could actually be really insulting to have like these stalls where people are not allowed to park when there's already a parking at a premium. So I was just wondering about that confluence. But you're just saying just make it ready, and then as those dynamics shift, as the price points shift, as people's economic mobility shifts, then we have that lower price point to upgrade to that, right?
I had suggested that maybe we make it required, but your point is well taken, and maybe that we're not at that point right now.
But they could use those that will one day be functional as regular parking until such time as they're
Exactly.
needed.
Well, and I don't
Yeah,
know
so
that
then-
the
so then
ordinance.
your suggestion is appropriate.
But I mean, this is good impact. I don't know that the ordinance, and my understanding is the ordinance doesn't really say how that's managed. It just
Right.
says what's built, right? So whether or not a non-EV car is allowed to go in there, or whether or not they have to charge for the power is, I would assume our ordinance is silent on that.
Right, it's all private parking.
So it's not to say that the building owner can't do something insulting to those residents, but our ordinance doesn't necessarily address that. It's just what's built. Thanks.
And, you know, and in the larger context of what the city and the sustainability department is trying to do with our assessments and our work on EVs is to really incentivize private charging, right? We know that it happens at home, it happens at the workplace. So this is really the next step for us in supporting that vision.
Thank you very much, Peter. Sophia, that was wonderful.
Yep.
Looking forward to approving that.
Okay.
Council, we're moving on to item number 9, thriving in place follow-up. Allison's on the screen. I see Blake here. I see Tammy. I see Angela. It's all yours, Allison.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As you may remember from December 13th, which seems like a long time ago, you have raised a number of questions during the work session update on the city's anti-gentrification and displacement plan known as Thriving in Place. So the good folks at CAN have come back to help address any of these questions or policy issues you might want to discuss. Mr. Chair, I could go through these if you like, or there is a memo included in your packet. How would you like to continue?
Yeah, please go through the questions that you presented us.
Okay. So the first one is essentially that you could you could request additional information about the level of detail that will be provided on the additional funding needs anticipated, the potential funding sources, and when to anticipate receiving related budget updates. The second question would be on the housing development aspects of the plans. You could confirm with the administration that the RDA would carry out housing development aspects of the plan, although the plan itself has been stewarded by CAN. This was a topic that at least some of you would remember from previous years' council discussions. As the effort that the council made was to consolidate housing development in the RDA and housing services in the Housing Stability Division. Third question is essentially that over the years, both CAN and RDA have expressed their interest in community land trusts, so you could request an elaboration on this, including how each department's work could be coordinated with the other, so we don't end up with two community land trusts or things that seem very similar that aren't actually the same thing in two different departments. The fourth question would be in terms of the details and the elements of the final Thriving in Place document. For the December 13th briefing, you heard and read about the replacement of the housing loss mitigation ordinance, but you might want to ask about the other 10 near-term priorities that you can see in your packet were listed in Appendix 1 of the initial staff report. That's that big placemat. And ask whether those near-term action priorities would be elaborated to the same level of detail as the replacement of the housing loss mitigation ordinance. For the fifth question, you could request additional information about how Thriving in Place will complement Housing SLC, which is the state required city's 5-year housing plan, and what kind of information one of these would include that the other doesn't. Number 6, you might want to request that CAN identify the critical housing plan pieces required by the state and transmit those to the council in a format that the council might adopt before the state deadline on June 30th, 2023. Since, of course, in those previous 2 months, the council will be head over heels in the budget adoption process. And then presumably CAN could leave any of the refinements on these 2 plans to be adopted separately or processed separately. And then finally, just as a reminder, in the December 13th briefing, you requested that the administration include a placeholder in the mayor's recommended budget for housing related items so that opportunities are not lost based on timing. So that would be something that you could formalize or discuss additionally if you like.
Thank you, Allison. Cindy?
There were a couple of these that as a staff, we talked quite a bit about after your last discussion. Can I just make note of a couple of those items? Is that okay? So there are a lot of programs that are discussed in the draft or in the work that's been done so far that are new programs, and a lot of expectations are created by plans, and we were thinking that it would help the council if the administration could come the next time they do one of these briefings to share more information about the various programs that they are anticipating, so that as stakeholders, the council could get an understanding in advance in case there are any problems or concerns or questions about them. They're asked early enough that the administration can provide more information, clarify that kind of a thing. So, and then also what the funding sources would be of those programs, the potential amounts, those sorts of things, or the time frames. Just because the public sometimes thinks, well, we've spent a year on this plan, we've given all of our input, they put it in the plan, city council, get on the ball, when are you funding it all? So that could avoid some problems. And then, let's see, I think that's it. Most of the other ones are.
Mr. Chair?
Thank you, Cindy. Councilmember Mono.
So I'm understanding, okay, there's this list of 7 questions that Allison prepared, which Allison, thank you so much for helping us think through this. I'm understanding Cindy's question to be, we just want to make sure we're setting expectations properly so we know how long this will take and how much it'll cost. I guess the first question I would like to ask is, are there any of these questions you want to answer first?
Well, thank you guys for the opportunity to be here again. And I have, as you see, a team of folks behind me, attorneys on deck, online. David Drisker, our consultant, is online as well. I'm happy to answer any of these questions that have been provided here. Also, happy to go over an overview of Housing SLC and Thriving in Place, and maybe just talk about how they're similar and different, if that's helpful, or what. I'll leave it to your guys' discretion of what you'd like us to discuss today.
If you could start with that point, the Thriving and Housing SLC, how they're similar and different.
Yeah.
And then I want to just talk about some of the near-term actions. Might as well focus on some of the near-term things before we go into the 10-year plan. So talk about those two, and then I have some questions about
perfect. So Thriving in Place, as you guys know, we've briefed the council on this several times, most recently in December, where we outlined a very draft framework on the 21 different strategies that are on what we're calling the placemat. we specifically focused on the replacement of the housing loss mitigation ordinance. And the reason that we focused on that was really just so you guys had kind of a taste test of sort of where we were going with the level of detail, and knowing that housing loss mitigation has been a priority of both the administration and the city council. The two plans have been contemplated as being really close cousins or married since really kind of inception. And I'll kind of start with housing SLC and where that has gone over the past few months. So per state code requirements, the city is required to have a 5-year housing plan. Currently, we have growing SLC that is expiring, and during the last legislative session, the state made a lot of changes to moderate income housing plans. Of course, we weighed heavily in on those changes, and one of those being that we needed to adopt an implementation plan, which was incredibly inconvenient for us because we were in the final year of growing SLC. So if you guys remember last summer and early fall, Rudy and Can brought forth a implementation plan for growing SLC. And that went through a 45-day public engagement period and went before the Planning Commission. While Rudy was working on the implementation plan for housing SLC, we were going through the phase 1 community engagement and data analysis of Thriving in Place. And it became really apparent as we were going through phase 1 that there was a lot of overlap between what we were hearing from the community and what we anticipated we'd be hearing from the community on a new housing plan. And so it only made sense, we felt, to kind of combine the two efforts, because while Thriving in Place is an anti-displacement plan, a lot of the policies in here really are shaped around housing, right? And we also know that we are on a tight timeline with state code requirements that we have to have a new housing plan adopted by June 30th of this year to be in compliance. And that compliance is really important because that's how we get our transportation funding. We get get priority consideration for ARPA funds from the state and various other funding sources. And there's also numerous proposals on the table this year for penalties for cities that are in compliance, including the loss of our BNC road funds. So ensuring compliance with that moderate income housing plan report requirement is really important. As we were working through the process on both of these, as I said, it became apparent that there was a lot of nexus between the two. And the policies that were coming out of Thriving in Place, based on the community feedback and our discussions with the council, our community working group, and our city stakeholder team, really dovetailed a lot with what we were seeing and hearing from our community in the community engagement around the housing plan. So we've contemplated these two plans coming together. The community engagement piece has been carried for Housing SLC and for Thriving in Place has been carried out by Baird and Driscoll with a partnership with the University of Utah. So the community engagement has been sort of blended together for both of these plans. The data analysis that's happening in both of these plans are interwoven between the two. All of that being said, we certainly could separate the two if that is a desire of the council to do that. We contemplated the adoption of the two of them together, Thriving in Place being an appendix to Housing SLC, and the policies of Thriving in Place really being embedded in a lot of the policies that are coming through Housing SLC. An important distinction between the two, Thriving in Place is a displacement mitigation plan, Housing SLC is a housing plan. Housing SLC has very specific things that we have to do to be in compliance with state code. We have to have an implementation plan. We have to select 5 or more strategies, and the strategies have to be clearly articulated word for word within our housing plan. And that's really important because a lot of cities are not in compliance right now because they didn't have word for word in their implementation plan those strategies.
They're prescribed strategies from like a menu?
Yep, exactly. And so that's where Housing SLC really kind of differs from Thriving in Place, because we have to make sure that we select those strategies, their exact exact words of what's in state code, copy and paste, and then we can fill in how we want to achieve those strategies. And that will come from the council, our community engagement, and the data analysis that's happening. Does that feel like a clear explanation?
Yes.
Okay.
At this point, but so I'm looking at this housing SLC. So Thriving in Place would just fit very well into the housing SLC.
Correct.
As one of it could be part of any of those 5 goals or 10 goals, whatever we want to pick. It's all part of that because it's housing, just anti-displacement on the housing side.
Correct.
So
yeah.
it fits well underneath it. It doesn't need to be separate because it's going to be fitting into that.
That's correct, yeah. And we certainly could separate them if the council wanted them to be, adopted separately. But I think that just the way that the 2 plans have been developed, they inadvertently come together, but the adoption process could certainly be separated.
Right, because each of your goals has to have a plan on itself.
Correct.
So they're sub plans in that regard.
It feels to me like housing SLC is the zoning, and then Thriving in Place is the overlay.
Yeah, I think another way to think of it too is we have Plan Salt Lake, right, which is sort of our big general plan, and then under that we have subsidiary master plans, right? And so I think you could think of housing SLC as sort of, obviously it's nestled under Plan Salt Lake, but it is sort of the foundation, and then TIP is integrated into that.
On this placemat, right? So I'm going back to my next question about the near-term actions of replacing the housing loss mitigation ordinance. Is that part of the housing SLC also, or is that just Thriving in Place?
Yeah, so...
hold on, then just add
Okay.
another question to that whole thing is, can we start working on this, revamping this ordinance well before we submit anything to the state?
Yeah, that's a great question. So a little bit about where we're at in the process of each. So Thriving in Place, David is about 75% done with a draft. So we've taken the feedback that we've gotten from you guys, taken these 21 action items and started to drill down. For each one of these action items, it's going to have a 2 to 3 page summary depending upon how detailed it is. And under each one of these is going to be the purpose, the next steps, the budget, the schedule, best practices, who will be responsible for implementation, and the schedule of the implementation. So that will be completed, that draft will be completed by the end of the week or early next week. Housing SLC is a little bit behind Thriving in Place. And so Housing SLC, we are currently, Rudy's the project manager on that. He's drafting that right now. We've done a data analysis and existing conditions analysis that we'd like to bring before the council in January, if that works with your schedule, or February. And then we're working on what those goals would be. Both plans have a community working group, they have a city stakeholder team, and they have an internal policy team that consists of staff from CAN and RDA and that kind of core policy team. And then, a bigger city stakeholder team that's almost every department within the city. So Housing SLC is a little bit behind. To answer your question on housing loss mitigation, we certainly could, I think, pieces, as if you guys can, it feels like December was a really long time ago, but it was only a few weeks ago. But sort of dusting off what we presented that day is really a complete rewrite of our existing housing loss mitigation ordinance, and then kind of pairing it with the community benefit and tenant assistance program. And we certainly could start working on that as soon as we get the go-ahead from the council to do so.
And feel free to rein me in if I'm getting too far afield here, but in the budget component that will be presented, will that be revenue sources and projected expenses? Are you going to be proposing, or do we have to make room in the general fund for all of this? Are we going to look for special revenue streams?
Yeah, so there will be a budget component with each one of the 21 action items, and then I believe it is 4A is just a kind of generalized budget. How do we create a funding source or funding sources, right, that continue to kind of replenish, whether that's an in lieu fee or a property tax, whatever that looks like. We're still flushing that out. So there'll be sort of that bigger kind of budget piece, but then each one of these action items will have what could be a proposed budget for them, right? And specifically the near-term action items will have most of these, if not all of them, will have a budget request if the council is okay with that. And it sounded like in our December briefing that you guys preferred for us to put budget requests in the mayor's recommended budget this year. Those will all have specific budget requests, and I don't know that they will necessarily be coming out of the general fund per se. For example, if the council chooses to adopt the business licensing reform that we've proposed here of collecting additional tenant data, business licensing would need another 1 to 2 FTEs, right? So that would probably be something that would probably come out of the general fund, whereas increasing tenant relocation assistance could come out of some of our housing and urban development money potentially. So I think we are currently working on kind of figuring out what the different funding sources could be, where we would need to have a general fund request versus where we may partner with existing community organizations to leverage their resources and have them run a program for us.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Mr. Chair.
Go ahead, Councilmember Fowler.
Thank you. Angela, I just want to say thank you for this again. I remember a lot of this from our brief in December. Looking at the questions, and Allison, thank you, as Councilmember Mono said, for sort of putting into more concise words what our questions were. The two I really want to focus on, I've been focusing on this for a long time, and I want to continue focusing on it, is not reinventing the wheel in 2 different departments. And so, one of the things that the questions bring up is dividing the housing development money into RDA and the housing program money, or the implementation of different programs, into CAN. And I still don't know that that's completely efficient, but it's more efficient than having 2 different funding sources for sure. Excuse me. And then secondly, the question with the community land trust. Again, the whole idea of what we've been trying to do for the last 5 years, excuse me. Sorry, what we've been trying to do for the last 5 years is really streamline processes so that consumers, i.e. renters mostly, aren't the ones that take on the burden of increased prices because developers will say that the city took too long or they didn't have the streamlined process. So those 2 questions I'd really like to focus on.
Thank you for those questions. Good questions. Councilmember Varlamores.
So I think I want to tag along what Councilmember Fowler said, and I don't know if you guys talked about the question. I think it's number 3. You already have discussed that? You have not? Okay. So yeah, I would like to understand why there's 2 groups interested in the community land trust when we thought one group was going to take a stab at it as the first thing, as to streamline, to not duplicate, and also to test it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you. So Thriving in Place is probably a little bit zoomed out from the dividing of who would run the community land trust, whether it would be in CAN or RDA or both departments. Right now, the language in Thriving in Place around the community land trust, which David has ended on goal 3 and is starting to draft goal 4, which is where the community land trust is we haven't really gotten incredibly granular within the plan on those kinds of details. Like it's more zoomed out because it's already 60 pages and we're 75% of the way done. So we haven't gotten into that level of detail on any of the items short of like this would be housed within community and neighborhoods or within the RDA area. It would be a partnership. And that one specifically hasn't been fully drafted yet. What I'll say is that I think the lens that we've had when we've been putting together these policies is having us internally with weigh in from the council and from the administration and from the departments within the city that would be working on these, to have us sort of figure out what makes the most sense. And so we haven't gotten into that level of detail. I certainly could work with the administration and work with the leaders within our respective departments to get more granular on the community land trust question, but it hasn't been something that we've been heavily focused on, that division of those responsibilities, so much as saying both RDA and CAN would have both expressed interest and are both working on community land trust programs.
Is there one community land trust or two, or do we?
I thought it was just one. Oh, I see two here. Okay.
Two.
Well, this
Okay.
is, okay.
So there are two, and okay. So back to the Councilmember Fowler's point of the efficiency of, okay.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
What's the difference? Okay, can you, brief me on that?
Yeah, I'm going to actually, if it's okay, phone a friend and have Tammy, or if we have an RDA, maybe have Tammy and Danny come up and speak to.
And if we could speak specifically to the port tax increment, and if that earmarked money is playing a role in either of those, or if that's still a potential community land trust that's in the works.
I'm sorry, I was
Mr.
walking up. Can
Chair?
you repeat that?
If we could speak specifically to the tax increment money allocated from the port, and if that is already being dedicated to one of these community land trusts, or if that is a potential community land trust yet to be created.
And if I could just add, Tammy, I'm sorry. Sorry to interrupt. Kimberly Chitras from the Attorney's Office is also on the line, so I wanted to make sure the council members were aware of that for additional clarification if needed.
Thank you.
So I don't want to speak for the RDA, but I will give a broad overview of what I know. I believe it was $4 million allocated from the Inland Port funding to the West Side Community Initiative, and I believe the RDA is still working on the structure of what exactly the West Side Community Initiative is. And then speaking on behalf of community and neighborhoods, it was in 2017 the City Council adopted a resolution that satisfied 1082 of state code that allowed the city to create a community land trust to sell property at a discounted rate. And currently there are 17 single-family homes in the community land trust, and we're actually preparing information to give you a briefing on the community land trust and some larger housing stability questions, and an update on the Housing Stability Department at a future date, so we can get in much more detail on how that's been functioning in CAN at a different date.
And Danny, on the community land trust.
Happy to provide some quick
Yeah.
detail on that question. So to date, the RDA does not have a community land trust established. What you as a board have approved is the West Side Community Initiative, which is a section within our housing funds allocation policy, and that outlines what your goals and priorities are as a board for how to spend the Inland Port money on the west side. One of the objectives within that West Side Community Initiative is to look at shared equity models of development, which is what we're working on. So we have not yet determined whether that's going to be a community land trust model or whether that's going to be some kind of shared equity, either agency ownership, developer community ownership, but that is what we're working on right now.
Thank you, Councilmember Warden.
So I'm surprised to hear that we have more than one community land trust. So are you saying that we have the community land trust and then we have this account from the Inland Port, and we're calling those two community land trusts, or is there yet another community land trust?
No, the
How many
city
community
has
land trusts do we
the
have?
community land trust. That's the only one that you have officially on the books.
Got it.
Within the RDA, you have the West Side Community Initiative, which is more than just a land trust. That really outlines the policies and objectives and goals of the board for how to spend the Inland Port money on the west side.
Got it. And there are no other community land trusts of any kind that are ours?
And if I may add just some
Right.
clarification, the That's my understanding.
Okay.
And I don't want to speak for Danny or the RDA, but I believe the West Side Community Initiative contemplated a shared equity model, and that can look different ways. It can be like a co-op, so there's an entity, a nonprofit entity having ownership of the improvements. The land could be owned by the city or the RDA, and there could be a shared equity model that way, or it can be done more traditionally through single-family housing and a traditional CLT, which is what has been happening more on the city side.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I got the 17 pieces of property that the city owned under the land trust. That is separate from the west side. And those 17 properties are scattered. I'm going to say scattered about the city. They may be in this concentrated area, but I'm just saying they're not all in one section. And the west side is specifically what's outlined in the contract with Inland Port on the funding from the tax increment.
Yes.
Okay, so that's in addition to the other 17 properties. Okay.
And I should say the West Side Community Initiative allows you to spend those funds on much more than just a shared equity model development. That's how you're funding loans, property acquisition, any housing development objectives west of I-15 as per the goals you've laid out as the board.
And those could be vacant lots or actually a lot with a house on. The 17 you're talking about, Tammy, is 17 houses.
Single-family homes.
Single-family
yes.
homes.
Mhm.
Okay, thank you. Councilman Romano.
I know that community land trust is sort of a broad term that can mean a lot of specific sort of arrangements. Can you tell us a little bit more about the 17 houses? Like, how long has the city been? We don't own them, right? Like the owner owns them, but we own a part of them or a deed restriction or something. Can you tell me what our model looks like?
We own the land and lease the land at very below market. I think it's like $50 a month or something like that to the owners of the improvement. So they buy the house at an affordable rate and then lease the land from the city. And then when the homeowner decides to sell, there's a shared equity model. So the city gets a portion of the equity to go back into the land trust model, and then the homeowner gets a portion of the equity, and then the housing unit is resold to a new family who qualifies.
So it will in perpetuity stay as a below market rate unit?
Yes.
And it would be income qualified for who could purchase that?
Yes.
Is that the way that it's written?
One of the shortcomings that we've identified, the current administration has identified on the current community land trust, is in 2017, the City Council adopted a resolution authorizing the city to create the land trust and to sell properties at below market rate. So there was a public benefits analysis done to satisfy 1082 of state statute. However, the City Council really didn't set objectives or goals or parameters for the program. So we very much want to come back with you with a CLT briefing. So there's a clear understanding between the administration and the council of the functions of the CLT. So this is very much a discussion that we've initiated with council staff. There's a transmittal that was just sent last week. We're preparing more information on the community land trust, but we very much want to make sure that we are on the same page with how it's functioning.
Great. And those 17 houses were, in 2017, they started being built?
Yes, it was authorized in 2017.
Got it,
so
thanks.
a few of the homes were actually new construction, but the majority of them were existing homes that were purchased and placed into the land trust.
Thank you. Councilmember Wharton.
Is the land underneath the other side village in the land trust? Because sounds like we're using that for a similar purpose, even though we don't have an intention to resell that.
It's a similar purpose in providing the long-term affordability, but no, we weren't really contemplating this in the land trust model, partially because there won't be like a selling of property for home ownership.
Okay.
It'll allow TOSA to rent the units out, and there won't be that shared equity model.
Okay. And then about this having the RDA separate, does it, I guess I'm a little, like, if it's a trust, like, a trust can have several accounts in it. Does it make sense to have, would it make more sense to put all of the assets in the same trust, but have it separated out in an account for the West Side from that RDA money? Because that money would go out, we would presumably use that money for the West Side, but outside of the Inland Port RDA, right? Does it make sense to like consolidate it, or is there any advantage to that?
I don't know if we've had those conversations, and I don't know if there's any advantage to having it one account or still split between the city and the agency. I think it depends on what your goals and objectives are.
Okay, but it doesn't. With the only reason I'm asking this is because the income for the RDA, the one under the RDA right now, is all coming from the Inland Port, but we can spend it anywhere on the West Side, right, outside of that RDA zone.
Yes, those funds that are allocated by you as a board to be spent on the West Side.
Okay, but
and that's separate from
perspective
any
of
other
what the
RDA
CRA
requirements or
boundaries.
yes.
Got it. Okay.
Kimberly? Yeah, thank you.
Councilmember Wharton. From a legal perspective, the Community Land Trust is not legally a trust. That's what the program is called. So it's a construct as to how the program operates. And it's called a trust because the city retains ownership of the land and this equity sharing. So just so you know, it's not like a legal trust like you're thinking, it's set up as a separate entity. It is not set up as a separate entity. It's property owned by the city. So as you go forward, you'll have the opportunity to think about how, when they give the presentation to give you more details on this, you'll have the opportunity, I think, to have the conversation about if you want to broaden or revise how the program works and how it might fit with other similar objectives in the city.
Thank you very much. It's great to have two lawyers talking about trust, and I was like,
Thank you.
Appreciate that discussion and that education there on that. We kind of went into that rabbit hole, which is a very good discussion on the Community Land Trust because it is one of the top 11 on the action items here. On these, I know they're not all in, it's not a series. There's a lot of in parallels. There's all one after the other. There's a few more ordinances, and there's a few are just policy changes. And I guess we're mapping out how we want to tackle this and, eat this elephant bit by bit so we're doing it in a way that we don't have to have the full plan baked out before we start taking action on some of the near terms. Is that part of the idea, or we need to have a full plan approved before we tackle some of the actions?
We have been operating that we would have the plan adopted before we would start, not necessarily before, because I think I've been working closely with the attorney's office on understanding, what our ordinance changes, where we have state preemption, kind of how we move this forward from a legal standpoint. And so our intention is certainly to be working towards implementation of especially the near-term action priorities as soon as possible. We don't want to get ahead of our skis and start working on something that the council doesn't support. Yeah, we aren't skiing, unfortunately, right? But we don't want to get ahead of ourselves and start working on ordinances for something that the council doesn't support or doesn't align with your priorities. And so we would probably want to have more direction on things that are, specific priorities of the council, things that you guys would like us to be working on, and we certainly could start prioritizing those in the queue. But we haven't, we've at this point have been just sort of contemplating this as an entire package.
There's a lot of information here. I appreciate that. There's a lot of high-level stuff. Now I'm going to turn my mic on. I heard somebody behind me say something. I appreciate this this document. I think it's great information here at the high level. I was just trying to make sure that we're continuously as efficient as possible moving forward. So.
Yeah, and one of the things that I think would be really helpful for the administration is are there certain things on here that we either have identified as near-term action priorities that you want elevated that you would like us to start working on? Are there things that haven't been identified as near-term action priorities that you want to have as a near-term action priority? And maybe we, as I said, we're going to have a draft ready early next week at the latest. If the council would like to do some more small work groups, we'd be happy to do that. However, we can best engage the council so that this is a lot to digest. There's a lot of information here. There's going to be a lot of information in Housing SLC. We want to ensure that the council feels comfortable with the policies and programs that are being proposed here. And so we're more than happy to get that information to you however is best for you guys. And also if we want to pull out some priorities, we're happy to do that as well, whether that's through working on the policies, working on the budget, whatever that looks like to meet your guys' priorities.
Thank you, Councilmember Palomares.
Thank you. Thank you for that offer. Maybe it is in a small group meeting. I'm not sure, but because it's a lot of information and because you guys do, really good work and you're very involved, obviously, in all things housing, I would like to, if when I have the small group meetings, I would like you guys to organize the information that says, these are the low-hanging fruits that we can get done now. Like in the next 6 months is something that we're already working on and we just need this extra push to get it done and finished. And these are the things that we have to start from scratch or it's going to take way more money to get this done. So that's how I see this episode. So my brain, it's easier for me to understand what we're trying to get to because everything is important, obviously, in this document. I want to do everything, but you guys know what the capacity is, things that you're already working on, and what's totally from scratch. So
great.
I would like that information in the small meetings.
Yeah,
small group
that's
meetings.
helpful
I like
feedback.
that. That's helpful. That Councilmember Mono.
I will say, I think, Angela, you said something to the effect of housing loss mitigation is something we can start working on if you tell us to. I wasn't sure exactly what you meant by that, but for me, that's a priority, and I would like that to begin as quickly as possible. I don't know how the rest of the council feels, but in terms of where to start, I think that's a great place to start.
Okay, thank you. That's good feedback. What I meant by that comment is that we haven't started working on any ordinance amendments or anything like that because we want to make sure that what we're proposing aligns with the council's priorities. And so we could certainly start, and I know the attorney's office has already started a red line of our existing ordinance, so we could start taking those steps of, amending our existing ordinance. And then Kimberly and Paul, I don't know if you guys want to chime in or add anything on this. No? Okay.
Thank you for that, because I kind of agree. It was one of my big big items was the housing loss mitigation, and how can we go forward with that before we actually approve this? Because you could just do that all by itself, right?
Mm-hmm.
And not even have this plan.
And I don't remember exactly the chronology of everything, but I remember us talking about housing loss mitigation ordinance before we even started Thriving in Place. So
Probably.
I think we've been wanting to do that, and then we thought, oh, well, let's do it all in part of this bigger thing, but I don't want this bigger thing to make that one go slower,
Right.
personally.
And I do, Councilmember Baltimore's idea about the low-hanging fruit. Councilmember Wharton.
Yeah, since you asked, yes, my first priority is to replace the housing loss mitigation ordinance. And then my second and every place after that priority is I would like to hear from you all as, experts that are sort of on the ground looking at these things every day, what you think our second, third, and fourth priorities should be, because I only know what I hear from people that contact me that talk about and things that I see in my own community. I don't have that sort of global view of, it's more of like an inductive than a deductive view, and so I would like to hear from you what you think we could have the next biggest impact, because I think the fear of all of this is that we spend a lot of time identifying the problem and talking about the problem, and we all know that it's a big problem, but how are we, making these measurable, demonstrable steps to show that the plan's actually going to produce something? Because it does feel very, very daunting, when we hear, oh, it's not just Salt Lake, it's like the whole Wasatch Front that you need to fix, and we don't have jurisdiction over all that. So what do you think we should do next is what I want to hear, and I'd love to do that in a small group meeting. But the ordinance is really important to me. I really don't like the current ordinance, and I want a new one.
Great, thank you. That's really helpful feedback. Thank you.
Yeah, any other further questions, comments? Yeah, appreciate this. This is great work. And
Thank you.
It's nice that we're hitting it little bit by little bit, because it's a big ticket item here. So
Great. We'll work with council staff on getting small group meetings set up and
right.
start working on the HL housing loss mitigation ordinance and amendments. Thank you.
Yahoo. All right. Thank you very much. Council, we're moving on to our board appointments. We're quite a bit early. So the first one is a board appointment for the Planning Commission of Anaya Gale. Is Anaya Gale here? Oh, is that?
I had to join remotely just because you're running ahead.
Hey, thank you very much for coming in early.
Yeah, you bet.
Appreciate that. Thank you for volunteering to be on the Planning Commission. It's a big job. And thank you for stepping up to the plate on this one. Tell us a little bit about why you want to be on the Planning Commission.
Yeah, well, I actually was raised with, my dad was a city manager, and so I've been at Planning Commission and town and city council meetings for a long time. I'd actually really enjoy the planning process and see how important it is to the development and ongoing development and change within a city or town. I am a commercial real estate attorney, so I have I have the advantage of having a lot of experience with planning and land use and that sort of thing. And Adrienne Bell, who's a great colleague of mine, just spoke of her really great experience serving on this planning commission and highly recommended that I give it a shot. So I would love the opportunity to do it.
Thank you very much. Council, any questions, comments? Councilor Romano.
Thank you for volunteering for this. This is the board that I was on right before I was appointed to the council, and I had a chance to serve with Commissioner Bell, and so if she recommended you and thinks you're the right fit for this, I am very supportive. So thank you so much for your service.
Thanks. Yeah, you bet.
All right. Thank you very much. I see no other comments or questions for you. I appreciate that very much. Thank you for volunteering on this. It was such an important job. You'll be on tonight's formal agenda for approval, and you need not be there or online to win. But thank you very much, and have a happy New Year.
Great. Thank you. You all have a happy New Year as well, and thank you for all you do.
Yeah. Council, we're moving on to item number 12, board appointments for Transportation Advisory Board. John Close. Looks like that must be John, you online?
I am.
John, good evening, and thank you for volunteering to be on the tab. Appreciate this endeavor. And tell us a little bit about why you want to be on the board.
So first and foremost, transportation is my passion. I've been a professional transportation planner in the Salt Lake Valley for over 8 years now. I am a University of Utah graduate student and, well, was a student, obviously graduate at this point, where I currently work. I see a lot of opportunity here in the Valley for improvement with transportation connections, and would love to be a part of that effort and making transportation a priority for our Valley.
Thank you very much for volunteering. Council, any questions for John? I see no questions. We're a pretty easy crowd here. Both the Planning Commission and Transportations are very hardworking and vital to our city's function. So appreciate your time and effort. And you'll be also on our formal consent agenda items this evening. And you don't need to stay up late to watch us. And I look forward to your work in the future.
Thank you so much. I appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you. Now, Council, we're moving on to item number 13, which is the board appointment interviews for the Racial Equity and Policing Commission. We have a few people here. We have is Uliva here. She might be online. Julia, Stephen, and Catherine. They're all here. Perfect. All right. Start off with Dia. You got it first. You know, me in a minute. All right? You can sit up here. Sure, come up here.
Thank you. Hi. Yeah, I'm a student at West High, and I've seen firsthand what it's like to have an effective kind of conversation and communication between police and students. And so, I think it would be really cool to be able to help that effective communication happen.
Wonderful. When do you graduate?
I'm a junior, so 2024.
Wow. You are impressive.
She just won one of our Human Rights Commission awards as well and was honored there. And then correct me if I'm wrong, you used to be your student rep to the school board as well, correct?
That's my big sister, so.
It runs in the family.
Well, Happy New Year. That's wonderful. I appreciate it very much. It's wonderful to see young adults like you stepping up to to do this, because it's a big ticket and it's a great opportunity for you, but also for us as older generations to hear from the new, fresh minds and their perspectives. So appreciate your effort here, and you'll be on our consent agenda also this evening.
Thank you.
So thank you very much.
Yeah.
Oh,
I just wanted to
sorry.
say- no, not a question. Just wanted to say you're great, and I think we get to kind of share them as the Uman girls, because you don't live in my district, but you do go to West High, so you probably spend a lot of time there.
so-
I think you live in Anna's, so between the two of us, we're very
say it.
proud to have you representing our districts
I
on this
think
commission.
I redistricted myself into Ale's district.
Oh.
All right, this is stuff.
Well,
No.
I don't know. We'll have to check the borders on that, but either way, West Side is still clearly in my district. I'm keeping it. Thank you.
Fine, fine.
So welcome. You'll be
Thank
great.
you.
And it's so great to see someone as young as you be interested. So we're glad to have you.
Thank you for helping with our
Thank you for having
redistricting
me.
also.
Oh, yeah. Thank you.
Next, we have Uliva. How about that? Must be Julia. Are you online? Oh, sorry. Go right ahead.
Okay.
Yeah, come on up.
Hello. So do y'all know what Salt Lake City Peer Court is? Yeah, so I do Salt Lake City Peer Court. I'm a peer mentor, and I've been doing that for a couple years now. So I get constant interaction with youth who feel like they have a distrust with current law enforcement and how like police interact with the youth. And I've gotten a lot of feedback from the people who I, mentor and stuff like that about how they may not always feel comfortable speaking up for what they want in police officers, but I've been like thanked and stuff about being willing to speak and represent people who, may not feel like they have a voice in it. So I feel a really great passion in terms of policing and stuff like that, just because I work with them weekly, and it's just something I care a lot about. So yeah.
Again, very impressive, because that's so vital, because you get kind of like tunnel vision, and having your perspective out there and respected perspective is so vital for us, our students and the police officers.
Yeah.
Everyone wins in this case. So thank you very much.
Chair, I just want to thank you. Yeah. And I just wanted to, I think I'm gonna speak for myself, but I think everybody would be open. If anytime you want us to come over and have conversations with you and ask us questions, please do. We're available. We want to hear and also share our perspectives, and we can all talk about, the things that we know we need to improve on, and the things that, might not, but to have that dialogue, because sometimes, we're not, we don't go to all of the boards all the time. So please feel free to contact us.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
It's just really exciting how like young women are going to save us. Like,
We've lost our.
it's amazing. Thank you for
We have a
keeping up the faith for us.
Yeah, of course.
All right, thank you.
We have a technology issue for just a second.
We're on the technology hold.
Council Chair, we've just lost some video feed on our WebEx. If you could just give us 1 minute, excuse me. Our audio is still going through, so if you'd like to continue, we'll work on the video troubleshooting next.
Great. And do we have Julia on the line here? Were you Julia? Sorry, I thought, sorry. Oliva? Stephen? Oh, thank you very much, sir.
Good afternoon. Okay, is that better? Okay. My name is Steve Calvert. I'm a court administrator here for the Salt Lake County courts, and also I've been a single foster parent for 31 years. I've raised over 130 youth in the valley, and I've adopted quite a few other young men as well. And I felt like this would be something, me being an example, good example of being involved with this, to show a lot of even those kids that are in care, that they do have a voice and they can be heard, and that we can, and also teaching my own that, you know, you have to really be able to look at things from both perspectives so that you can have a real clear understanding of what's really going on, and try to be a positive voice in our community.
Thank you very much for all that work as a foster parent. That's incredible. That's wonderful. And,
Wow.
Any other questions, comments for the? I appreciate your work on the REP, and I really appreciate your work in the foster care program. Councilmember.
I appreciate your input too as a court administrator, and seeing both sides of those interactions that people are having with police officers. And I think that you bringing that perspective will be really valuable. So thank you.
You bet. No problem. Thank you very much for your time. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you, Stephen.
You bet.
All right. And Catherine. Oh, you're on mute.
Able to hear me now?
Yes.
Yes, got you there.
Oh, okay. Sorry. I did the test too and it worked, so I don't know what happened. My apologies, but thanks for having me here today. Sorry about that. A little bit about me. I just recently moved to Salt Lake City because I started a position as an assistant professor at the U in the Department of Sociology, where I primarily teach in the area of criminology. So needless to say, I'm very passionate about issues of equity in the criminal legal system, and very passionate about volunteering as well. Before that, I lived in Las Vegas for 5 years, and when I was there, I sat on the Citizen Review Board, which is the board that provides independent oversight to the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department. In that capacity, I provided oversight for hundreds of community complaints against the police, so I'm very just passionate about doing that work. I was very active in that capacity, and I really understand how important this type of work is and how much responsibility it can be. It was a really meaningful experience to me. I plan on staying in Salt Lake City for a long time, and I want to set roots in the community and be involved and help to improve the community. And I think I'm most prepared and excited to do that by volunteering in the realm of the criminal legal system.
Thank you very much, Catherine. Any questions? This is an impressive group. This is wonderful opportunity for the city to have the four of you on this commission. I mean, I've always been impressed with the RIP Commission. They've done some wonderful work lifting the city up and broadening our view on things. And I think the four of you will just amplify it even more and really make it even more positive than it already is. So appreciate again your work and your future work, working together. And you'll be also on tonight's formal consent agenda. Thank you. We have one left, and I'm not sure if Oliva is here.
While we're waiting, may I ask a question related to the REP Commission? When we created the REP Commission, it was important to myself and a few other council members that we give the commissioners a stipend. Is that still happening? Great. And where are we on other commissions and stipends? Is that?
Recorder's Office is coordinating with Finance and HR to work on establishing a process for the compensation of other boards and commissions.
But I appreciate the REP Commission is still being compensated. Thank you. I know it's nominal
thank you
and
very
probably
much.
not enough to cover your time, but thank you for your service.
That concludes item 13. We'll move on to item 14, report of the chair and the vice chair. I just want to say congratulations to the the future new board members, the new vice chair. So thank you very much for that.
Thank
Mr.
you.
Mono.
No report, but thank you so much for your support.
Cindy?
Two quick items. First is that in January every year, we remind council members about the need to fill out financial disclosure forms. And it's my understanding, the city attorney can correct me if I'm incorrect, but if you haven't had a change, I think you don't need to fill out one of the forms. But if you have, then the staff can assist you to get you in the correct form so that you can do that with the assistance of the city attorney's office if necessary. Then it's also time to decide what month you each will do your city council newsletter in collaboration with the public utilities department's mailings that go to all of the utility customers. So they have identified 3 months where we can have up to 3 council members put a newsletter out. And the cost of the newsletter printing is borne by each council member in their communication budget, but there's no incremental additional cost to the mailing. So we have April, August, and December. And so, let's see, with an election year, August probably should be avoided for anyone who's up for election.
For the printed newsletters, the public utility. It can only be one council member in April, or can
No,
be?
3.
Oh, 3? Okay, so April.
Okay, so you are, Anna's requesting
Ollie has probably the same thing.
Right.
Okay, so all 3? Okay.
It was August, and what was the other month?
December.
I'll do August.
August
if
and December.
No
okay.
one else cares.
Of August and December.
Wait,
Okay.
those are the only choices?
April.
We have plenty of room in August and December, so you can choose either.
I think August.
Okay.
August.
Okay. All right. And then if anything happens in the next couple of days where people need to change or anything like that,
It can be flexible
I get
too.
where you want to be.
I'm fine with whatever. I probably have the least stressful year, so just plug me in where.
The least stressful year?
Yeah, just put me in where other people. Yeah, y'all have to run for re-election. That's much
Great.
more
Okay.
stressful.
Thank you.
And one more thing, we have a closed session to go into for attorney-client matters. We do. And real estate. So I look for a motion.
Mr. Chair, I move that we enter closed session for the purposes of purchase, lease, or sale of real property and attorney-client
Second.
advice.
I have a motion from Councilmember Mono, a second from Councilmember Valamoros. Any questions on this item? Seeing no questions, I'll roll call as Councilmember Wharton.
Yes.
Mono?
Yes.
Petro?
Yes.
Morris?
Yes.
Fowler? She might have boarded on the plane.
Please.
She's bored and is Pui probably. Okay. That passes 5-0 with Councilmember Fowler and Pui absent. We will be entering closed session at this time, so our work session meeting is over.
So your work session meeting will commence upon closure of closed session or end after the closed session?
It will end after the closed session.
Thank you.
For our formal session will start at 7 p.m. Thank you. Oh, can I